Hello everyone, and welcome to a new part of What If Deku Had the Infinity Gauntlet. If you enjoy it, please like and subscribe. It really helps me. I did not write this story. The original writer is Lord Wolf. Please support them. Now let's dive in. Shigaraki was not happy. Not the least bit with the situation that presented itself today. First, the Yakuza was being stubborn and refused to meet with them. They were obviously playing the long game. Something that Sensei taught him: these groups will sometimes put off meetings in order by time or to make you lose your patience, which in turn would cause you to make a mistake. And on top of all that, he had that brat Apotheosis here talking to him as if he was a child again. Something that irritated him to no end. Could you repeat that? Tamura said dangerously. It's simple, these two wish to join my department, so I'm taking them with me. Izuku shrugged nonchalantly from where he was sitting. You've gotten pretty cocky, haven't you, kid? Shigaraki sneered at him. That tends to happen when one obtains a vast amount of power. Izuku smirked at the villain. I don't see why you're so upset. Dabi and Himiko just want to try out other prospects. You've run out Nomus and your league is kind of at standstill right now, he told him the blunt truth. You're not doing so well, Tamura. Ever since Sensei was imprisoned, the League of Villains hasn't really made much progress other than a few seemingly random attacks here and there. He gestured to the dark-haired fire user and the psychotic blonde. It's not like you're never going to see or use them again. If it helps, you can think of them as a liaison between our two organizations. You've got some nerve, Midoriya. Tamura. Shigaraki glared at him through the fingers of his father's hand. I remember when you were just a scrawny little quirkless nobody, helping petty scumbags and bank robbers perform small-time jobs before Sensei and I led into our group. You were nothing before you joined us. Nobody was interested in you. Even the police didn't start investigating you until the UA attack. Izuku frowned as he went on this rant. Now you sit there with your little toy and think you can do whatever you want. Shigaraki stood up from his chair. Get out. If I ever see your face again, I'll turn you to dust, he spat as he turned to walk away. We're not done here, Tamura. Sit down, Izuku said calmly. Shigaraki ignored him and kept walking away, only to freeze when a powerful force held him in place. I said. The villain was lifted up in the air in front of all his subordinates and tossed back into the chair he occupied a moment ago. Sit down. Izuku's aura turned dark and menacing before it vanished as quickly as it came, returning to his warm, pleasant demeanor, which honestly frightened the members of the League. I don't think we're understanding each other, Izuku remarked. Allow me to explain things. He paused as he looked to the villain across from him with a serious expression. I don't think I made it clear before, but the only reason you and your league still exist is because of All for One. Sensei was kind enough to help me, to give me advice and a place to work in privacy. And because he showed me such kindness towards a quirkless nobody, as you put it, I decided to extend a similar kindness to you, his successor Tamura. Shigaraki. He then smiled again in that creepy way. Without that, I would have crushed the League of Villains by now and you and your members would be rotting in a cell. I should grateful? Is that what you're saying? Shigaraki spat. No, you should feel lucky that I still consider you a friend and look up to All for One as a mentor, Izuku explained. So just be very careful with what you say and do towards me, because this, he gestured to the abandoned warehouse the villains currently occupied, could all end if I so desired. He stood up from his chair. Now do we understand each other, Tamura? Shigaraki? Yeah, I think I get it, Shigaraki growled out. He didn't like it, but his mind started plotting anyway for him to use this to his advantage. At the very least, it seemed Midoriya was keen on letting them do as they pleased for now, but how long would that last? Now more than ever, Shigaraki needed to get his hands on that quirk-erasing weapon that the Yakuza was rumored to have in their possession. Great. Izuku opened a portal. We'll be seeing you then, he smiled as he stepped through. Toga of course didn't hesitate to follow him into it. Dabi however looked to Shigaraki and the rest of the league for a moment. Nothing personal, guys, the patched-up man said before stepping into the portal towards his new role. When they were gone, Kurojairi, who remained silent through the whole altercation, finally spoke. I know you don't want me to say it, Shigaraki, but we still need his friendship, the misty villain said. He's probably the only thing keeping the heroes off our trail at this point. What does she see in him? Twice murmured to himself, a little upset that Toga just left with Midoriya. Probably the cute freckles. He was of course ignored. Kurojairi. Tamura removed the hand from his face. Tell me about this weapon Sensei left for me again. Meanwhile. Welcome to the temporary headquarters. Izuku gestured to the large portable trailer they were currently occupying. Where the hell are we? Dabi asked as he looked at one of the windows and noticed a lot of construction going on outside. An island out in the ocean I created, Izuku told them as he sat down at the desk of his makeshift office. I'm sure you noticed the tremors felt throughout the city recently. That was you? Dabi raised a brow. Oh, he's only getting stronger, Toga gushed. This is where the main base of operations will be built, Izuku told them while ignoring the blonde girl's thirsty gaze. It will serve as a home base, a training facility and as a factory for the Titan robots. You still haven't said what you need us for, Dabi noted. Don't get me wrong, things seem to be stagnating in the Handman's League and I'm glad that you offered a better alternative, but why did you recruit us specifically? Izuku merely smiled in response. I want you two because of all the members of the League of Villains, you two were the most reliable and willing to listen to me, the green-haired teen explained. I want you two to work with another agent of mine that I recently recruited. The three of you will be my eyes and ears in the underground world of villainy. I now have my hand on the heroes, but you three will be my black hand on the villains. Izuku needed them to keep the villains in line while he kept the heroes in line. Now it made sense to Dabi. Apotheosis never liked to leave too much to chance. If he was to succeed in his eventual absolute control over the Society of Heroes, then he would need control over the Dark Society of Villains too. There were other groups out there besides the League of Villains. Izuku wanted them to basically do the dirty work for him. Not that they had a problem with that. Who is this agent of yours? Dabi asked. Where is he? Himiko asked as she glanced around the office. He's busy, Izuku grinned. I've been idle for a short period, but now while my base is being constructed I shall bring judgment swiftly down upon the false heroes. These next heroes on my list will serve as an example, just like Endeavor. Now Dabi liked the sound of that. Later city streets. Thank you. You're too kind. MT Lady smiled at the adoring public. She had just successfully pinned down a villain who tried to rob a pharmacy, and after the police took him away she stuck around for the reporters to take pictures and to sign autographs. It was great being a hero. Ahem. Someone loudly fake coughed behind her. MT Lady turned around in her normal-sized form to see a tall man dressed in black armor, overcoat, and a strange black featureless mask that covered most of his head, leaving only one opening for his mouth. Mount Lady, on behalf of the HRD, you are required to come with me to face evaluation, the mystery man said in a rehearsed fashion. Evaluation? The female hero questioned. Yes, evaluation, or sentencing if you prefer, the man repeated. In other words, the boss, Director Midoriya, wants to see you. And what does that little boy want with me? MT Lady asked in a mocking tone. You're one of the heroes at the top of his list. She could see his grin through the mouth hole of his mask. You're on the chopping block, Mount Lady, so come with me and face the boss's judgment. Just what sort of authority do you have? Who are you anyway? She demanded. I work for the HRD, that's all you need to know, he shot back. Now are you going to come quietly? Please don't, because I have permission from the boss to use force if necessary. Just who does that little brat think he is? MT Lady didn't like being talked down to, especially in public in front of fans and reporters, so she tried to rudely shove the masked man away. That proved to be a big mistake. In one instance the man had dashed behind her with shocking speed. The hero felt a shallow cut on her cheek, and when she spun around the man was holding a combat knife stained with a few drops of her blood. You tried to harm an agent of the HRD, that's really not going to help your case when you're in front of the boss, the man chuckled darkly as a tongue came out of the mouth hole of his mask to lick the blood. In the next moment MT Lady suddenly lost control of her body. In front of everybody she collapsed like a puppet that just got its strings cut. Take her away, boys, he ordered to someone she couldn't see from her position on the ground. A large metal foot entered her vision as something growled and bent down to grab her by the leg. The Titan robot dragged the hero over to an armored truck where it roughly tossed her into the back where the two other heroes were sitting, not paralyzed as opposed to her, because it seemed they surrendered themselves peacefully, unlike her. And that makes 3, the man said as he checked off the third hero on the list he was given. Midoriya wanted these 3 specifically to make a big show out of. In the same way that he made a show out of Endeavor's humiliating defeat, and honestly he couldn't wait to watch it. Stepping into the passenger seat of the truck, the vehicle quickly sped off, leaving a confused and somewhat concerned crowd of fans who quickly started uploading what just happened to social media. The truck drove for about an hour until it stopped suddenly. By then the paralysis wore off, allowing MT Lady to move and look to see who else was brought in like her. To the left sat the snake hero Uwabami, and across from her sat Jin Inochi, also known as the hero/meteorologist weather dominator. Before she could ask them about how the two of them were captured, the doors to the armored trunk opened, revealing 3 of those tall scary black robots standing there along with that masked agent. "Get out," he ordered. "And don't try to run. You won't get far." They could hear the amused grin in his voice. The 3 pros cautiously stepped out of the vehicle, keeping wary eyes on the Titan sentries. Looking around, they noticed that they were outside the front entrance of the Hero Public Safety Commission's central office. Waiting for them at the steps was Izuku Midoriya himself, with a line of his robots behind him. The boy smiled as the heroes approached. Cameras were set up around the area, televising this live. "Uwabami, MT Lady, and Weather Dominator, do you 3 know why you are here?" Izuku asked the 3 who chose to remain silent. "You're here because the 3 of you have failed to live up to the idea of what a hero should be. 2 of you," he pointed to the women, "care more about fame and attention than stopping villains or saving lives. You, on the other hand," Izuku turned to look at Weather Dominator. "You disgust me more than these 2 combined. Using your quirk to create localized weather events so you can report them. Not only that, but extorting agriculturists for money. I don't know what you're talking about." Jin denied such allegations rather quickly. "Really?" Izuku placed a finger on his cheek. "Because you're very wealthy for a low-ranking hero and meteorologist. My mother left me a lot of money when she passed away." Jin quickly restated the excuse he always used. "That's interesting considering your mother lives in a retirement home and is very much alive." Izuku smirked at him as he stepped closer to this corrupt man. "You think I didn't do my research on you, Weather Dominator? You changed your last name when you became a hero so no one looked too deep into your lies." One of the robots handed him a large envelope. "Now this is especially interesting." He took out some photos he obtained a while back. "Look at that, it's you taking bribes from various agricultural businesses. Apparently you use your quirk so the crops get enough rain to grow, and the ones that refuse to give you money, you use your quirk to ruin their crops and destroy their business." He showed the cameras the incriminating photos so the whole world could see. "Jin, you didn't?" Uwabami said, shock evident on her face. "Oh, like you're one to talk, you pompous media whore." Jin snapped at her. "You know, you'd be surprised what people who have been oppressed will tell you when you extend a helping hand and a promise to end their troubles." Izuku confessed to where he originally got this information. A simple visit to these business owners and a few hidden cameras was all it took to expose this man's crimes. "Jin Inochi, you have been judged guilty of being a false hero and gross misuse of your quirk." Izuku flash warped forward before the man had a chance to react and grabbed his face with the gauntlet. Purple veins spread across his face and body as the hero screamed in pain as his quirk was extracted. The green-haired teen released him when it was over, letting his unconscious body collapse like a rag doll. The 2 female pros watched in horror at what just happened. Uwabami quickly realized that they were next and quickly tried to talk her way out of this. "Now I know what you must think of me, but I dash." The snake hero was cut off when a metal gauntlet covered her mouth. "Nope. No excuses," Izuku said as he silenced her. "You're just a celebrity, not a hero, so what I'm about to do is completely justifiable." He activated the soul stone as the woman's screams were muffled by the device covering her mouth. "At least you have your modeling career to fall back on," he scoffed as the snakes in her hair disappeared as her quirk was forcibly taken. After she fell to the ground, green eyes turned to the last one left. In a panic, MT Lady tried to run only to blocked by a line of robots and the masked man. That hesitation cost her everything as Izuku warped behind her. "Don't think because you're a new hero that you'll be given mercy," the director spoke. "You just started and you already think you're some kind of star. It's a shame that hero school you went to didn't do anything to curb that ego, but then again none of them seemed to do that." Without hesitation he reached out and grabbed the back of her head. It was over in seconds and she too was tossed to the ground like the other 2. Izuku then turned and looked to one of the cameras. He raised his hand and pointed directly at it. "You're next." That was his warning to all the other corrupt and false heroes that he was coming for them before the cameras cut out. "Wow," the masked man applauded. "You know, I think I like your method better than mine," he chuckled. "I told you it will be a far better punishment to have to live as quirkless nobodies for the rest of their lives than to simply die." Izuku smiled at him. "Live with the shame, rather than die as victims to your crusade is so much better, isn't it, Stain?" The man took off his masked helmet to reveal the hero killer himself. "I think I'll miss the groveling they usually do before they die," Stain said as he looked at the 3 unconscious bodies with disgust. "Oh, we're just getting started," the wielder of the gauntlet told him while creating a portal for them. "Come now, would you like to meet the 2 people you'll be working with? They're both big fans of your work." He gestured to the portal. "Todoroki household. Shoto, dinner's ready, Fuyumi said from the doorway of her brother's room. Shoto took one last look at the black card that came in the mail this Saturday morning addressed to him, before pocketing it to think about later. Father decided to join us and Natsuo is here too, she sounded nervous. Shoto nodded and followed his older sister to the dining room. Lately Enji Todoroki had kept quietly to himself. He probably had a lot to think about. What with losing his hero license, agency, the population's respect and his quirk in one fell swoop. Shoto walked in and his father's eyes immediately zeroed in on him for a brief moment. The hot and cold boy sat down at the opposite end of the table while his sister Fuyumi sat to the left while Natsuo sat on the right as they usually did during these weekend dinners. The Todoroki family ate in silence. So how is your work-study program going? Fuyumi asked to break the awkward quietness. It's going fine, Shoto responded quietly. Seeing that there wasn't much conversation to be had there she turned to her father. How have you been, father? Fuyumi realized that was probably the wrong thing to ask as she asked it. I lost my quirk. How the hell do you think I feel? Enji practically snarled at her. It seemed he was still quick to anger, that hadn't changed yet. Do not talk to her that way, Shoto glared at his father letting a few embers emerge from between his fingers. Father and son stared each other down until the quiet snickering of Natsuo interrupted. What's so funny? The former hero snapped at his other son. It's just, you called the three of us failures, but in the end you're the biggest failure of all, Natsuo mocked. And now you're whining about being quirkless, as if it's the end of the world. I will not be talked down to by a brat who couldn't even cut it as a hero, Enji growled at him. Says the guy that got his ass handed to him by a group of robots, Natsuo fired back. But the true irony is that it was a quirkless kid that took everything you cared about. I only wish Tuya was alive to see it. He hated you more than anyone. Enji slammed his fist into the table wishing he still had his quirk to put this brat in his place. His meal was suddenly frozen over stopping whatever rant was about to leave his mouth. Following the trail of ice it led to the other end of the table where Shoto was silently eating his soba while keeping his bicolored eyes locked onto his father's. Calm down, Shoto finally said after he finished eating. If you can't handle some harsh criticisms then Midoriya was right to rob you of your quirk and hero status. You agree with that, punk? The former hero snapped at his son. Yeah. I wasn't sure about his methods but they are getting good results, Shoto said boldly. You never deserve to be a hero. You only care about yourself and your ranking. His father was fuming at him now. Midoriya was right, you should have stopped caring about this feud with All Might. You should have just been a hero and been content with that, because it doesn't matter in the end if you're the best. Having finished his meal and said his piece he stood up from the table and left the dining room. Natsuo looked at his younger brother with pride having stood up to the bastard while Fuyumi looked at him with concern. The woman stood up from her seat bowing apologetically to her family and followed after him. Shoto? Fuyumi walked into his room to see him staring at a black business card in his hand. I'm going away for a while, Fuyumi, Shoto suddenly spoke. I've been offered a position in a new hero program and I've decided to take it. Just please make sure you do what you think is right. Shoto turned to face his older sister. Whatever it is you plan to do. I will, he said quietly while turning to look at the letter that came with the card. A logo at the top resembling a closed armored fist with an eye in the center and the letters H, R, and D at the bottom. Shoto Todoroki. You've been invited. Join the new hero regulation department. I believe you'll make an excellent addition to the elite team bent on correcting this flawed hero society. As you probably imagine, there are more people like Endeavor out there. People who like him don't take the role seriously and see it as a path to fame, glory, or wealth. I would like you and others to serve as an example of what a true hero should be. In the department you will be given exclusive training and benefits to help you become that hero. The offer is all yours, you can accept it or continue the slow trudge to heroism that UA offers. I think you have great potential, Shoto, and I want to help you reach it. Call the number on the card if you wish to join. Izuku Midoriya, Director of the HRD. P.S. There is no time frame attached to the offer. My door is always open for you. The youngest Todoroki took a deep breath. He wanted to do this. He needed to do this. Midoriya understood what was wrong with the world and now had the power to fix it. Midoriya wanted real heroes and a real hero is what Shoto wanted to be. But could he trust Midoriya? That was the question. He had been thinking lately over everything that the dark green-haired teen had done. He built a device that gave him nearly limitless power so people will listen to him and take him seriously. He exposed the truth about All Might, beginning the process of people letting go of this ridiculous fake standard that the number hero represented. He then strong-armed the Prime Minister into legalizing the purging of false heroes in the form of his Hero Regulation Department. Shoto had already heard the news concerning the 3 pro-heroes and what happened. So it seemed that Midoriya was honestly trying to fix the problems using extreme methods, but so far it looked like it was working. With his mind made up, Shoto Todoroki pulled out his phone and called the number on the card. Uraraka. Izuku called from his temporary office. "Can you bring me the file 11C?" he asked politely. "Sure." Ochako sifted through the folders on her own desk until he found the right one and walked into his office to hand it to him. "Thank you." Izuku sat there with his jacket off and sleeves rolled up. His gauntlet, of course, was always on. "Do you ever take that gauntlet off?" the girl suddenly asked. "It's just I always see you wearing it." "Of course I don't take it off," Izuku frowned. "Do you realize what they would do to me if I ever removed this?" He waved his armored device at her. "So how do you keep your arm clean?" Izuku sighed at her question. "There's a hydration and disinfectant mechanism built inside," he told her with complete seriousness. "I thought of everything." "All right." Ochako grossed herself out imagining if he didn't have an internal cleaning method built into his invention. "Damn, these people are stubborn," Izuku cursed as he read the forms he submitted. "Rejected again. What are you trying to do this time?" the gravity girl asked. "Well, I'm trying to have a ban put on hero merchandise," Izuku replied. "All it does is further glamorize the hero profession and put money in the pockets of their agencies and the corporations that back them." "That seems appropriate and fair," Uraraka thought about, and that would be a good idea. They really shouldn't be encouraging children into these jobs without them fully understanding what they're getting into. It was all part of Izuku's plan to get people to be heroes for the right reason and not become celebrities. Yes, because at the end of the day pro-heroes are really nothing more than public servants, Izuku scowled. Where are the firefighter figures, or the police chief t-shirt, or hell, where's the action figure of me? This is a job, not a marketing platform, he sighed in exasperation. Getting himself worked up again wouldn't help any. Some people in the Senate are obviously in bed financially with some of these companies. I just have to weed them out. Well, when we get our own office building and more staff, this department can get more done. Ochako smiled pleasantly. "Thank you again, Izuku, for hiring my parents' construction business." "It's nothing. I needed someone to build our branch office in the city while the fortress was handled by a different, more private construction company," Izuku told her. "Be that as may, this job will help my family out immensely, and I just wanted to." Uraraka blushed brightly and stepped around his desk. She quickly leaned down and gave him a quick peck on the cheek. Izuku's green eyes widened as his own face turned red. He placed a hand on the spot she just kissed. "Thank you." "Why, you're welcome." He cleared his throat quickly and repeated. "You're welcome." That was a little bit of the old him still in there somewhere. "Anyway, come look at this." He gestured to another folder on his desk. Ochako opened it up and read it. Yeah, that's not good. What she was reading was a rather slanderous article that someone wrote condemning Izuku's actions lately. "Actually, I think it's funny," he smirked. "Just a bunch of sad rambling idiots that are afraid of change. Well, you did take down 2 popular heroes recently. And we're better off without them. Look at this." He pointed to his computers where documents were open. "Look how many heroes are getting their act together just to avoid being publicly humiliated and stripped of their quirk and status." The numbers showed the average of pro-heroes that were working harder than ever. "My method is working, yet these fools are acting like I'm committing murder. Maybe you should do an interview?" the brown-haired girl offered. "I think my actions should speak for themselves, but maybe you're right," Izuku thought about. "Maybe if people had it explained they could perhaps understand. We need to find a media outlet that's fair to guests and won't try to persecute on live television." She thought about it while he groaned in annoyance. Going on some talk show was something he'd rather avoid, but maybe he could have it work in his favor. UA dorms. According to the former heroes Uwabami and MT Lady, the 2 heroes have apparently lost their quirk after their encounter with director Midoriya, Yayorozu read from one of the articles that had been circulating lately. The young director has yet to comment on exactly how he's able to remove the quirks from people. "You don't think he'd do something like that to a student, do you?" Mina asked with concern. "If the guy could take away the quirks of heroes he didn't like, then what about them?" "I bet he was going to do that to Bakugo that day he came here," Jairu commented. "Luckily Aizawa-sensei pulled him away." "Just what the hell is his problem anyway?" the pink girl scowled. "I get it, he was picked on and bullied for being quirkless, But that's no excuse to being a monster to those that had nothing to do with it. In other worlds, this is all Bakugu's fault, Tsuyu supplied. That's not what I'm saying, Mina argued. Kirishima, back me up here, you've talked to Bakugu about this, right? Kirishima snapped to attention before dropping his normally positive demeanor. Actually, I haven't talked to him since Midoriya came to visit, he sighed dejectedly. How do you talk to guy that you used to think only acted like an asshole when you find out that he actually is an asshole? Well, we at least need to get his side of the story before we make accusations, Mina said. What side? He picked on a defenseless person, so he's clearly in the wrong. I'm not sure I want anything to do with him anymore, the spiky red head argued back. Well, we need to know the full story. Mina raised her voice. How about you go talk to him? You get his side of the story. Kirishima was getting rather angry now at her persistence. Stop yelling, Aizawa walked into the living area on his way out the door. I've been called away. I'll be back, so don't start a fight while I'm gone, he said before he exited the building. The students remained silent a bit before the pink girl spoke again. I can't, Mina finally said. If he really beat up a quirkless person for no reason, what do you think he'll do to one of us if we stand up to him? You're afraid. Kirishima noticed. Of Bakugu? Yes. Yes, I am, the acid girl admitted. You got a principal's office. We think we found something, Nizu began his explanation. We noticed a usual amount of robots at this shipping yard, so I did a little digging. What did you find? Toshinori asked. The principal grinned with hope. Izuku Midoriya is a genius, he created a device meant to be used against his gauntlet, Nizu said excitedly. No way. Even Toshinori was ecstatic to hear that. There was a way to physically beat him after all. There was hope. Yeah, apparently he built this thing in secret in case the Infinity Gauntlet was ever removed and used against him. A friend in the Senate who has access to classified files slipped me a secret document that Midoriya wanted destroyed. The principal pulled out a copy to hand to him. He calls it the Anti-Gauntlet. According to the file, its purpose is to absorb the energy from the stones and render the Infinity Gauntlet powerless. How would we get our hands on it? Aizawa asked. That's the part you're not going to like, Shoyuta Aizawa, Nizu sighed. Let me guess, one of my students is going to be put in danger again? The homeroom teacher glared banefully. Not likely. We just need him to get in, get the device and get out while we provide the distraction, Nizu told him. Who were you considering? Toshinori asked. Training room. D. Katsuki blasted another boulder to bits. He had tried booking this training time with shitty hair, since he could physical absorb the damage of his explosion, but Kirishima wasn't talking to him anymore. In fact, no one in his class wanted anything to do with him anymore. Even Kaminari, Shiro, and Ashido were avoiding him lately. On top of all that, he had been forced to regularly attend counseling to help control his anger. You still seem pretty angry to me, Kaken, that mocking voice spoke. He had yet to tell Hound Dog of this hallucination of Deku that wouldn't go away. Still practicing for your provisional license remedial class. The last thing society needs is you out there on the streets fighting crime. You are and always will be a danger to innocent lives, Deku said, appearing before him still in the appearance of how he looked at the junkyard. I know better than anyone how dangerous you really are, and now your classmates know it too. I don't give a shit what they think. Katsuki snapped at the image his mind conjured. Ah, but you do, Izuku smirked. How can you be the best if everyone ignores you? How will you get that attention and praise you crave so badly? Katsuki glared at this imaginary manifestation. You care about what they think of you. You care very badly what everyone thinks of you. Before he could continue to argue with this hallucination, his teacher walked into the training. We leave in 30 minutes, get changed and meet me in front of the school, Aizawa said blandly as he turned back around and left as quickly as he came. Katsuki slumped his shoulders and headed towards the locker room, ready to face whatever his punishment would be. After he was clean and dressed, he made his way to the front entrance where Eraserhead was waiting patiently for him. The man gestured to the car and Katsuki got in without a word. They drove through the city in silence. Both of them obviously preferred it that way, to be honest. After half an hour they arrived at what looked like some kind of hospital or health center. Are you going to tell me what I'll be doing here? Bakugu asked gruffly. You'll see when we get inside, Aizawa said equally gruff. Gesturing for him to follow, they made their way inside. Inside the lobby, a woman, clearly a doctor going by the white coat, was there to greet them. Ah, Aizawa, glad you could make it, the woman greeted. Bakugu, this is Dr. Higurashi, the woman smiled pleasantly at the blonde. She was an average-height woman with dark brown hair tied in a bun and round black-rimmed glasses on her face. You'll be working with her today. Your principal has informed me of why you are here, the woman frowned lightly. You may see this as a punishment, but I hope you'll come to see this more as an opportunity. She regained her smile as she led the two of them into the facility. I still don't know what it is you want me to do, Bakugo stared forward while they walked through the clean halls. You see, young man, this facility takes in special children, the doctor explained. We care for them, teach them, and help them in any way that we can. She paused before she explained the next part. Most of these children are young, but have had hard lives. Some were abandoned, born into abusive homes, or suffered at the hands of others. They walked into an observation room which contained a large one-way mirror that looked in on a classroom filled with small kids around ages 5, 6, or 7. Tell him the most important part, Aizawa said as he looked through the window. The kids you will be assisting me with, Dr. Higurashi began, are quirkless. Bakugo's eyes widened to ridiculous proportions as he turned his gaze from the woman to the class full of quirkless children. There are some rules you must abide by, Bakugo, Aizawa began while ignoring the teen's look of shock. 1. You're not allowed to yell at the children, or physically harm them. The teacher paused for a moment. Also, you're not allowed to use your quirk around them. That was actually one of the doctor's rules. The children are already struggling with depression, so best not remind them of what they don't have. How long do I have to do this? Katsuki swallowed nervously. As long as it takes, Aizawa said dryly. A development studio. That's mine. Mei Hatsum placed another of her personal tools in the box. That's mine. She grabbed some of her blueprints. That's mine, another set of tools. I brought this from home. She unplugged the coffee machine and placed it in another box. Hatsum, Power Loader tried to get her attention. Hatsum. He yelled this time, making her stop and turn to him. Are you sure about this? I handed in my forms to the administration, so yeah, I am absolutely sure, Mei said excitedly. This is why I wanted to attend in the first place, to invent things for heroes. By joining up with Izuku Midoriya? Power Loader couldn't wrap his head around how she thought allying herself with that guy would allow her to accomplish her goals. Just the other day his student suddenly handed in her resignation or dropout papers to the principal, much to the shock of her teachers and the school staff. When asked why, she simply said that she was offered a position in Midoriya's hero regulation department. Mei, that boy is crazy. How could she not see that? Crazy? Mei seemed offended by that. So just because he has big ideas and big goals he must be crazy? She slammed the box closed and turned around with a huff. Midoriya wasn't crazy, he was simply very ambitious. Thank you for everything, sensei, but I need to follow my own path, Mei said before walking quickly out of the workshop. I just hope you realize what you're getting into before it's too late, Power Loader spoke quietly to the empty room. Part of him was glad that the studio wouldn't be blown up every other day, but another part of him would miss the girl and her antics. Mei Hatsum was definitely the most interesting student that he's had in a long time. 3 days later. Is everyone in position? Aizawa spoke into his mouthpiece. Yes, multiple voices repeated. Good. I'm going over the plan one last time, the underground hero began. Nizu has hacked the camera feed of the shipping yard, so Midoriya will have no idea who was here today, so don't worry too much about being spotted. He heard the principal confirm his part of the plan through the headset. I'm going to go in with a disguise to distract the robots. Better they come after me than our unfortunate volunteer. He stressed that last part with great concern. This was the part of the plan that he hated. He turned to look at the student that stood beside him waiting for the plan to begin. Ida, as soon as the robots leave the area you dash in. You're looking for a large metal shipping container labeled 56-inch. Tenya was chosen for this job as the agency that he was involved in for his work study was right down the street from the shipping yard. It was the perfect alibi, and Midoriya would never suspect a student would take his device. It was almost too perfect of a plan. Something Aizawa felt uneasy about. There should be something in there that looks similar to Midoriya's gauntlet. Simply get it and get out. Do you understand, Ida? I've got it, Aizawa-sensei, the class rep confirmed. Remember, if something happens or if something doesn't seem right, I don't care about the device. I want you to get out of there immediately, the underground hero warned. It's not worth your safety or life, do you understand? He said sternly. I understand, Ida nodded as he put his helmet on and walked out of the alley to get into position. I swear if something bad happens to him, Nizu, Aizawa threatened his boss. Everything will be fine, Nizu's voice assured him. We planned this out perfectly. Then why do I still feel sick to my stomach? The underground hero still couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong about this whole situation. This was what they were looking for though, a mistake on Midoriya's part. All villains, even the smart ones, make mistakes at some point, but Midoriya was more than just a smart villain. Don't start the diversion until the interview begins, the principal reminded him while ignoring the man's worries. Currently an interview was about to go live featuring the wielder of the Infinity Gauntlet himself. They decided to use the time that Izuku was on the air to swipe this anti-gauntlet right out from under his nose while he was busy answering questions. Even with his warping abilities he wouldn't just suddenly leave the interview, at least according to the psychological profile that Nizu did on him. I have the channel on, it will start in few minutes. Aizawa placed the helmet over his head that would keep his face and identity hidden. He was wearing a dark jumpsuit that was very different than his normal costume and lacked his patented capture scarf. There couldn't be anything that would leave him recognizable. It's starting go. Hello, my name is Shino Ryunosuke of J News Nightly, and today we have a very exciting interview. A man with green skin and dragon-like horns sticking out of his head spoke with joy. Director Midoriya, the young head of the government's new hero regulation department, has agreed to come on and speak to us about his recent actions. He paused before looking to the left of the stage. Please welcome Izuku Midoriya. The camera panned over to reveal said teenager standing there in all his glory, wearing his pressed gray suit and gauntlet still secured to his left hand. Good afternoon, Ryunosuke. Izuku greeted him with a smile, reaching out with his right hand to shake the man's offered one. He took a seat across from the interviewer after introductions were out of the way. So let's begin. You were hired by the Prime Minister over a month ago to be the director of the Hero Regulation Department, or HRD as it's taken to being called. The man tried to avoid the awkwardness of talking to a teenager as if he was an adult, but it was obvious. Yes, that is correct, Izuku nodded. So what is the purpose of this department? What does it do? Ryunosuke asked. Our job is simple. To regulate and reform the hero profession, Izuku explained. Removing heroes that don't fit the new standards and elevating those that do. I think I speak for most of the population when I say we understand Endeavor and Weather Dominator. After what they've done, but why Uwabami and MT Lady? I don't think they deserved what they got. That's interesting that you can't see how those two women grossly misrepresented what it means to be a hero, Izuku remarked with amusement. Those two cared more about their popularity than they did doing their job. Last I checked, being a hero isn't the same as being a celebrity. You may have a point, but, the interviewer was cut off. No, I do make a point. That's what I'm doing, is making a point, Izuku said a bit harshly. But removing a person's quirk? Don't you think that's a harsh punishment? Ryunosuke questioned. You know I'm actually quirkless, the teen supplied. You make it sound like being quirkless is some kind of torture. Is that what you think being quirkless is like? Who is that man in the mask that works for you? Ryunosuke quickly changed the subject to avoid answering the question. Which Izuku picked up on. That is a special agent of mine. His identity is classified, the gauntlet user explained. He secretly keeps an eye on the heroes for me and brings me information that they would normally keep quiet about, Izuku smiled. For example, the amount of property damage caused by MT Lady whenever she uses her quirk in public, or the fact that Uwabami makes millions of dollars off her products and modeling. That's common knowledge. You're just exacerbating things people already know for your own benefit, the interviewer accused. Really? Common knowledge, you say? Is that why the agencies use money and influence to keep these facts out of the media? Izuku accused right back. In fact, anything that would make these people seem less heroic seems purposely kept out of the news. I think you're just assuming things without any proof, Ryunosuke said, thinking he had him on the ropes. Is it not true that you are attempting to ban hero merchandise? He suddenly asked, changing the subject and shifting the focus once again to try and make the boy look bad. Yes, I am, Izuku smirked, seeing the game the man was playing, but unlike Ryunosuke, he had a secret weapon. I think it's ridiculous that public servants have action figures and t-shirts. All the merchandise only further glamorizes the profession of heroism and misrepresents what it means to be a hero. But if this law gets put into effect, you'll hurt a lot of corporations and hero agencies, the man added. I'm sorry, I thought heroes were meant to protect civilians, not their corporate backers, Izuku fired back. Speaking of backers and dirty money, the boy smirked wider as he reached around his chair and pulled out an envelope. Remember when you said removing a hero's quirk was a harsh punishment? Well, in the case of MT Lady and the Snake Hero, I gave them the option of earning their quirks back by telling them to donate their time and energy to charity or perhaps community service. I even attempted to put them in contact with a wellness center that takes in depressed quirkless children, that I've been financially supporting for quite some time. He had taken the leftover money he had after he finished his gauntlet from his time as a villain and donated it to the program. Dr. Higurashi was very grateful for said donation, and when asked for his name he just told her to call him Deku. It was the first name that came to mind. Those two women have yet to do anything of the sort and have instead used their time, money, and influence to start a smear campaign against me. Well, what would you expect when you're the one who Izuku cut the man off. They have paid to have articles written condemning me for my actions, and they even paid off a certain reporter to steer this interview in a way that paints me in a bad light. Isn't that right, Shino Ryunosuke? That's not true, the man denied. We have a thing called integrity here at J News. Izuku simply opened the envelope and pulled out largely printed photographs of Iwabumi and MT Lady discussing things in a green room with Ryunosuke, and then a picture of them handing the man untraceable cash. I'm sorry, what were you lying about? Izuku cocked his head in a coy fashion. My agent is very good at what he does, isn't he? He had purposely had Stain spy on them, having a good idea of what they were up to. That was the whole reason he agreed to this interview in the first place. Let's cut to a commercial. The interviewer was sweating now. Nope. Keep rolling. Izuku belayed those orders with his own. The camera operators were more afraid of Midoriya than they were of losing their jobs, so they kept going like he said. Don't you think the people should know that not only are their heroes corrupt, but their media heads are also just as corrupt and self-serving? The dragon-faced man remained silent. Now then, I'm going to say what I came here to say. Izuku turned to the camera. All I'm trying to do is to give the people heroes that they deserve. Not some pompous celebrities or monsters that abuse their quirks and status for personal gain. Ryunosuke was completely ignored now as Izuku pointed his index finger at the camera. This is your fault, all of you who let the hero profession rot and become what it is today. If anyone has a problem with my methods and wants someone to blame, simply look in a mirror. Meanwhile, as soon as the interview started, Aizawa put on his disguise and started to move towards the shipping yard. He spotted the tall black imposing titans guarding the front entrance. Honestly, for a genius, Midoriya was incredibly stupid sometimes. The fact that he had robots guarding this yard was like putting a big sign out that there was something important hidden here. It still seemed too good to be true to erase your head though. With a long overhand toss he threw a cluster of smoke grenades at the machines. The robots turned their heads tracking where the grenades came from until they spotted him. With a growl the titans began stomping towards him. Aizawa turned and tanned towards a nearby building, tossing more smoke bombs behind him to keep their full attention. Using a grappling gun to reach the roof quickly, the robots promptly followed by climbing the side. "Ida now!" he ordered into his communicator. The boy quickly ran towards the unprotected gates and with his engines propelling him forward took a big leap over it. Dashing through the shipping yard, Ida's eyes scanned left to right searching for the container labeled 56. He noticed a surprising lack of robots inside the yard, but he didn't have time to ponder that for long as he was on a time limit. There it is, Ida finally found the one he was looking for. A dark green metal shipping container with the correct number on the side. Glancing around for any possible guards or titans, he quickly made his way to it. Pulling the levers, he opened the container and finally saw what they sought. A glass container containing a platinum gauntlet similar to Midoriya's, but the stones were blank and colorless. Ida walked into the container, never noticing the portal that formed in the air above it. Opening the surprisingly unlocked case, he reached in and grabbed the device. "Ida, have you found it yet?" Aizawa asked the communicator. "Yeah, I have it," the class rep responded. "Good, get out there now," the teacher ordered. Suddenly the communication was cut and Ida nearly fell over when something lifted the container he was in up into the air. "Ida! Ida!" Shota Aizawa shouted into his mic. He had safely escaped the robots by hiding atop a different building that overlooked the shipping yard. With a pair of binoculars he was able to see what was happening. The shipping container that his student was inside of was being lifted into the air by a telekinetic force and pulled into a portal. What the hell is going on? Nizu, you said Midoriya wouldn't notice until it was too late. I don't understand. The interview is still going on live, unless the principal suddenly realized that they were deceived from the very beginning of this plan. Elsewhere, Ida panicked as he felt the container suddenly land on solid ground. He clutched the gauntlet to his chest protectively, as it was their only hope at defeating Midoriya. "Tenya, Ida, would you mind stepping out of there?" a familiar voice called. The young man held the gauntlet tightly as he reopened the doors of the shipping container and walked out. He was no longer in the yard, the container was moved to a whole new location. A large high-ceilinged conference room with a long table in the center. At the head of it sat Izuku Midoriya with his fingers interlocked together, and to his right occupying two of the chairs sat Ochako Uraraka and Shoto Todoroki. While Ida wasn't surprised to see Uraraka here, Todoroki was a huge shock. "You're just in time for the end of the show," Izuku smiled and grabbed a remote control. It was then that Ida noticed the large monitor screen above and behind Midoriya, playing the interview that was supposed to be live. He spun around in his chair to watch the rest. "The Prime Minister gave me full authority to deal with corrupt heroes any way I see fit. Soon you all will see that this is all for the better." The Izuku on the television paused before finishing his speech. "But until then I don't think you've all been properly made aware of how bad the heroes of today really are, so starting tomorrow I'll be bringing to light all the dirty secrets the Hero Public Safety Commission tried to keep out of the media." The real Izuku flipped the screen off before turning back around in his chair to face Ida. "I bet you're confused." Midoriya cocked his head. "The interview was never live, was it?" The class rep was finally starting to put the pieces together. "This was a trap. We filmed it yesterday and I ordered the J News to not air it till the next day and claimed that it was live." Izuku noticed the death grip that Ida had on the anti-gauntlet. "Will you let that thing go already?" Using the reality stone's power, he ripped the gauntlet out of the other boy's hands and slowly crumpled it into a ball. Aluminum and plastic rocks, any kid with a decent allowance could buy these materials at your local craft store. He tossed what he now revealed as nothing more than a crumpled prop behind him. "I mean, come on. Did you really think I would build a device that could be used against my Infinity Gauntlet?" Ida's eyes widened further as he took a cautious step backwards. "I purposely planted false information for Nizu and set up the hook and bait at that specific location close to your internship because I knew they would use you while someone else provided the distraction." Izuku revealed the workings of his elaborate trap. "Why? Why would you bring me here?" Ida's eyes went from Izuku to Uraraka, who looked back at him with concern, and then to Shoto, who looked apathetic. To talk, he gestured towards the seat next to Todoroki. Seeing that this was all a trap from the start and he probably wouldn't get far if he ran, Tenya decided to cooperate by sitting down and removing his helmet. At least until he found a way out of this. "Relax, no one is going to get hurt here. After this meeting is over you'll be returned to the city safely. Ida is here now, so can we begin?" Todoroki asked with a small amount of impatience. "Soon, we're just waiting on 3 more people," Izuku supplied. The group heard a noise coming from a set of double doors on the left side of the room. "Ah! That should be them now." The door swung open, first revealing a grinning blonde girl named Toga Himiko, then another known member of the League of Villains called Dabi walked in behind her. The patched-up man's eyes widened for a brief moment when he spotted the Todoroki boy before righting himself, an action that didn't go unnoticed by the dual quirk wielder. It was the third individual that had Ida standing up out of his chair. The hero killer stain in the flesh and looking as murderous as ever. "What is this?" Tenya demanded. Shoto remained calmed, but he too wanted to know. The only one not curious was Uraraka, for she was already told of the plan and knew ahead of time who would be joining them. "Sit down, Ida," Izuku ordered calmly. "There will be no fighting here, and if it starts I won't hesitate to end it. Trust me when I say you don't want that," he threatened. Ida glared at him, but slowly complied by returning to his seat without another word. Izuku smiled at him, then turned to the 3 newcomers. "Now if you 3 would be kind enough to also take a seat so we can begin." Toga of course immediately took a seat to Midoriya's immediate left, directly across from Ochako. Dabi sat down next across from Todoroki, and Stain sat parallel to Ida, not the least bit intimidated by the boy glaring daggers at him. "Now then, let's begin." Izuku clapped his hands, gaining their attention. "I'll keep this simple. The reason I've called you 6 here is because I've chosen you to be the first of the enforcers for my new department. I'm calling it the Knights of Balance, the main purpose of course being to restore balance to the world of heroes. The secondary purpose is of course to serve as examples of what heroes should be, and that is where you 3 come in." He pointed to the 3 on his right. "I think you 3 have the potential to be true heroes, and I want to help get you there with exclusive training, promotion and better gear than what U.A could provide." "And what exactly do you need them for?" Shoto asked while eyeing the 3 villains. "I need them to keep the villains of society in line during this transition," Izuku sighed. "Look, I'm not stupid. There are more villain groups out there and I don't expect them to remain idle while I slowly take apart and put back together our messed up hero system. In fact, I bet some of them even prefer the corruption and will probably attempt to throw a wrench or 2 in my plans." So Stain, Dabi and Toga will work from the shadows of society and bring these villains down from the inside. Don't worry, I've ordered them not to kill anyone, and that goes double to our former hero killer here. He leveled Stain with a look, and the man scowled in displeasure, but didn't protest. While they are busy, I want you three to become the faces of the HRD. He smiled warmly at his would-be knights. The first of a new generation of heroes. You already have our answer, Uraraka told him while Shoto nodded in agreement. They were both ready and willing to help give rise to the new standard of heroes. The only one who wasn't convinced was Tenya. How can someone like you create a better hero system? Ida argued. What gives you the right? It's not about whether or not I have the right. I'm the only one who can fix it, because I'm the only one with the will to act. The gauntlet wielder scowled at him. If it wasn't for me, everyone would have remained blind to the problem and the corruption until it grew so bad that there would be no fixing it. Sometimes when a forest grows sick, it must be burned down to give rise to new life. Tell me, Tenya Ida, would you prefer the corrupt hero system to the better one I want to create? You'll have to forgive me, Midoriya? Ida glared at him through his glasses. But the only corruption I see is here in this room. He leveled each person in the meeting room with an equal sharp gaze before sliding back in his chair. If that's all, I think I'll take my leave. Without another word, he quietly and respectfully left through another set of doors. Uraraka was about to chase after him, but Izuku stopped her. Let him go, the green-haired teen told her. He doesn't know he's on an island and can't leave on his own, he chuckled lightly. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves, I'll be back in a few minutes. Izuku stood up and opened a portal behind him that he vanished through, leaving the five of them in a very awkward silence. Outside, Ida wandered the building and construction zones, passing by more robots than actual workmen who were all too busy to tell him where the exit was. He had trouble navigating his way around the labyrinth of corridors and briefly wondered if he should just use his quirk to sprint around until he found the exit. His train of thought ended when a portal opened in front of him and out stepped Midoriya holding a digital tablet. You look a little lost, Izuku smiled, waving him over. Cool me? Let's take a walk and I'll send you home after. Ida didn't want to rely on him or have to spend any more time near this person, but without knowing where he was exactly, he had no other option. Following the other boy, Ida remained silent while he talked about the base that was still being constructed around them. We just finished the main building yesterday. By morning the labs will be done. I'm sure Hatsum will be pleased to hear that when she arrives. Izuku continued to chat away as if he was conversing with a friend. I'm hoping by later this week the training facility and robot factory can be completed and I can finally cut the red ribbon on our new base. You mean your base, Ida corrected. I like to think of it more as a home. It's always good to have a home, a place to belong. Don't you think? Izuku asked. Living a life without purpose or a place to belong, can you imagine what that must feel like? Why are you doing this? Ida snapped at him. I'm trying to put you in my shoes, make you see things from my perspective, Izuku explained. You've come a long way since I saved you from Stain, but you're not quite there yet. What do you mean I'm not there yet? Tenya raised a brow at the other boy's words. You're so close to seeing the world as I see it. Izuku calmly walked around him. You've already seen the way I exposed All Might and Endeavor. I've brought all the lies of this hero society to light, and now I'm trying to reform it into what it should have been all along. All you need to do is just see it and acknowledge it for yourself. What if I can't see it? Or more accurately, what if he didn't want to see it? You already did see it, you just chose to ignore it like most people do. Izuku smiled and held out his digital tablet screen. So how is your brother doing? He suddenly asked, as if to seemingly change the subject. Leave him out of this. Ida fumed. It must be terrible to watch your once wonderfully heroic brother reduced to a wheelchair, Izuku sighed sadly. Poor Ingenium, the once incredible fast turbo hero, now a just slug on wheels. He saw it coming and could have done any number of things to stop the punch headed towards his face, but let it happen instead. Ida's fist met Midoriya's cheek and nearly sent him tumbling back. Luckily Izuku had enough grace and poise to keep his feet firmly on the ground. How dare you talk about him like that? Ida shouted as his body shook with rage. If you just listened for a moment you would hear the point I'm trying to make. The gauntlet user wiped the blood from his lip with his thumb, not even bothering to heal such minor wound. Did you know your brother didn't have to be confined to a wheelchair? Seeing the look on Tenya's face, he concluded that his brother must not have told him. Yes, he was offered an experimental treatment that would at least give him back the ability to walk. Izuku showed him the tablet screen revealing files, documents, and schematics of a set of exolegs designed to be fitted to his brother's lower body. Unfortunately, the technology is expensive, even for your family, and when he filled out an application to the Hero Public Safety Commission to help pay, they rejected it. Izuku paused to let that sink in. Why would they do that? Ida asked. He wanted to refuse this boy's claims, but the proof was right there in his hand. He saw the application and immediately recognized his brother Tensei's signature. Well, normally the HPSC would help severely injured heroes with medical expenses. That is as long as the medical procedures will eventually lead to said person's return to their hero profession. Izuku explained the lesser-known policies of the government. Your brother Tensei's exolegs would only have given him the ability to walk again, as the technology has yet to get to the stage where he could go back to being a hero. So they deemed him useless, just like everyone in the world deemed quirkless people like me useless and discarded us like trash to be forgotten and unnoticed. Izuku handed the shaking taller boy the tablet so he could read through it all himself. Do you want to know what they used the money that they could have used on Tensei for? Not long after his request was denied, the hero Endeavor, in a fight against a group of villains, burned down a lot of businesses in the crossfire. They spent more money on paying off the business owners, buying their silence and compliance, than what they could have used giving your brother some of his mobility and dignity back. How did you find all this out? Ida was furious with the way the HPSC discarded his heroic older brother, but he needed to know how Midoriya came by such information. You're talking to the director of the Hero Regulation Department, Izuku chuckled with pride. Once I gained my position, I was granted legal access to all the classified files. All the dirty little secrets the HPSC tried to keep out of the public to make the heroes look clean are now at my fingertips. How could they be so callous? Ida collapsed to his knees as his hands tightened around the screen. There it is. Izuku kneeled down with him. He placed his gauntlet-covered hand on the other boy's shoulder. Now you finally see what's wrong. Corruption. Heroes are not heroes, and those who are weak or useless don't matter in this world. Taking the tablet from Ida's hands, he continued. I reopened your brother's application just last week. With me backing it, he'll get those exolegs and soon be able to walk again. And who knows, maybe if a certain director with a few connections and influence could hire a couple scientists to advance the technology in a few years, we could perhaps see the return of the turbo hero Ingenium. Ida's teary eyes snapped up to look at the green-haired teen. Why are you doing this? To make me join you? Tenya wanted so badly to believe that Midoriya was a villain at heart that would stoop so low. He really wished he could write him off as that. It would be so less complicated. Of course not. Tensei will be helped whether you agree to join me or not. Izuku shrugged as he stood back up. It's your choice. He gestured to the open space behind him. You walk out of here and be done with all of this. I wouldn't hold it against you. I just wanted to see a great hero like Ingenium be given what he is rightfully owed. What about your crimes? All the horrible things you've done, all in the name of this new better society you envision? Ida inquired as he too went back up on his feet. Tenya, I'll confess, I do get great satisfaction in punishing corrupt heroes, Izuku admitted. I'm only human, therefore I'm flawed. I did enjoy it greatly to see the look on All Might's face when I revealed his lies to the world. Izuku sighed as he looked away. I had to do a lot of terrible things to get where I am today. Some of it I loved, but other things like hurting my mother and causing Uraraka to get expelled I regret with all my heart. Izuku gave him a pleading look. I'm not going to lie, reforming this hero-controlled society is going to be a messy affair, and I can't do it all by myself. That's why I need your help. I need Ochako and Shoto. As much as you detest Stain, I need him too. That includes Dabi and Toga as well. He held his right hand out in front of Tenya. This is going to be a group effort, so Tenya, Ida, will you be a part of it or not? On one hand, Izuku Midoriya had a point about what was wrong with society and heroes, but there had to be other methods to fix it. All this violence and robbing people of their quirks was just wrong no matter what angle you looked at. Midoriya wanted revenge against the society that rejected him. That much was clear to Ida, and this is how the boy planned to get that revenge. To the young hero in training, it didn't matter how the other teen tried to justify himself, for he knew in his heart that Midoriya was wrong about how he wanted to go about this change. It was then that Tenya got an idea in his head. While Izuku couldn't be stopped physically and politically, what if instead he was taken down from within his own organization? At the very least, he could supply people like Aizawa and All Might information on the inner workings of Midoriya's department. Perhaps he could even find out how the gauntlet worked and its potential weaknesses. With that, they might be able to stop him once and for all. Perhaps Tenya could even convince Shoto and Ochako to see reason as well with enough time. I can't let an opportunity like this go, Ida thought as he reached out to shake Midoriya's offered hand. Alright, I'll see where this goes, but if something happens that I don't agree with, then I'm out. He was fully committing to the role of teen convinced to another side of ideology. I can agree to those terms. It's not like you're under a contract or anything. Izuku laughed, believing that he had finally won Ida over. The president of Class 1A retained his serious face, but on the inside his head he was already swarming with concerns. He had no idea what the future held now or what would become of him should this plan backfire, but for now it was the best shot he had. Toshinori in his gaunt form watched the heroes take care of the villain fairly easily from a safe distance. The sole reason those pros were having such an easy time was the fact that they had a troop of Titan robots backing them up. All Might had even watched one of the machines dive protectively in front of a group of civilians to shield them from a hail of bullets and shrapnel before he could even transform and intervene. The hero just quietly walked away, keeping his trench coat and hat on so no one would recognize him. As he made his way through the crowds, he pulled out his phone to continue reading the online articles. Teenage genius ushers in a new technological age. Titans, the mechanical peacekeeping force. Izuku Midoriya sets new standard for professional heroes. These were some of the headlines of the articles that have been circulating lately. After it was revealed that the disgraced pro-heroes that Midoriya exposed were the ones paying to have slanderous articles written about him, new more progressive journalists, who kept an open mind and non-biased agenda, were writing articles about honest opinions of the boy. There were still some negative things written, but all the positive things he accomplished were outweighing them in the eyes of the public. With the way things have been going lately, it almost seemed like the city didn't even need the symbol of peace anymore. Crime was decreasing, villains were being rounded up in droves, and robots were daily patrolling the streets, keeping civilians safe and assisting heroes at every turn. It looks like some good came from young Midoriya's scheming and plotting after all. No matter how much his old teacher tried to convince him, he still didn't see young Midoriya as evil. A villain, yes, but he didn't think that made the boy inherently evil in his book. He had discussed it with his successor Mirio, and they both came to the same conclusion, that Izuku was just looking for the one thing that he had been denied his whole life: purpose and meaning. As someone who was once in the boy's shoes, Toshinori could understand what it was like. It was true that he had forgotten, but lately the more he looked at Midoriya, the more of his past quirkless self he saw in him. It always hurt to wake up every morning in a world where the majority were born with something that made them unique. To have nothing that made him stand out or special, to wonder if he was born a mistake or a cruel joke from the universe. To feel like he didn't fit in. Part of Toshinori almost didn't want to stop Midoriya, because in some ways the boy was right. However, he knew it was only a matter of time before Izuku crossed a line, and he did when he took those heroes' quirks. He couldn't allow that vile quirk All for One to exist yet again in any shape or form or in anyone's possessions, no matter who it was. Not after everything he did to finally put that man behind bars. He owed it to his master and all the previous vessels of One for All to put a stop to it. If that meant going all out to defeat Izuku Midoriya, then so be it. He would just have to make it up to him some way when this was all over. The island. And here they come. Izuku waved his gauntlet and created 3 portals in front of him. From each came one of the 3 members of his Knights of Balance. Todoroki, Uraraka, and Ida. The 3 former Udata students came each carrying a couple bags and suitcases. Not only did they have to leave their school, but part of the agreement was that they had to live here at Midoriya's new fortress while they trained until they were ready. Shoto's dad Enji was furious that his son dropped out of UA. He told Shoto that as his masterpiece it was his duty to become the #1 hero since he had his quirk stolen. Of course, the dual quirk wielder told his father to blow it out his ass and that he'd be the hero he wanted to be and not what his father thinks he made him for, before handing him his legalized emancipation papers. As for Uraraka, her decision was even harder. She finally had to step forward and tell her parents that she is working for Midoriya. At first they were afraid for their daughter's safety, but she reminded them that it was just as dangerous being a hero in training. Plus Izuku had much better security than U.A, an army of robotic enforcers and the added protection from the government. Ida had to let his family know what was going on as well, and explain why he was leaving UA. They took it pretty well. Though his brother Tensei was very worried about his decision to act as a spy within the HRD, Ida assured him that he had everything under control and that Midoriya would be none the wiser. Welcome everyone to H.Q, he gestured to the large island fortress around them. Finally finished it this morning. Come on, I'll give you the tour, Izuku said with the excitement and enthusiasm of a kid on Christmas morning. Leave your things, something will get them. The group of teenagers did just that and followed after their new leader. Izuku conducted them around the complex, showing them the automated Titan factory, the lab, the workshop, and the living quarters. The tour ended at what he called the training area. "Shall we get started?" Midoriya smiled at them. "What are you talking about?" Todoroki questioned. "I thought we'd break in our new training facility with a little group combat practice." Izuku smiled as he led his new elite force through the finally complete island base. No time like the present. He thought the first thing they should do as a group would be a bit of sparring to see if they learned anything since the last time they fought. "You think this training facility you built will accommodate all of us?" Todoroki asked with a skeptical gaze. Izuku just chuckled lightly at his question while Uraraka did the same. She had seen the plans after all. "Why don't you take a look for yourself and then judge?" Izuku led them to a large metal door. Upon their approach, the doors slowly opened, revealing a huge open training room. The walls, floor, and high ceiling seemed to be made of identical square metal panels, and the room was lit with solar-powered lights scattered above them. The gauntlet user pulled out a small remote and pressed a few buttons. The group watched as the panels mechanically rearranged themselves, forming platforms, levels, walls, and barricades. "Tada! Impressive," Todoroki complimented. "That's right, and fully reinforced to withstand even the most powerful quirks." Izuku boasted the capabilities of his state-of-the-art training room. "Now then, go changed and we can begin." A set of panels in the wall opened, revealing an entranceway to what they assumed were changing rooms. When the three came out, they were dressed in training jumpsuits similar to their former school's gym uniform, but these were gray with the symbol for Izuku's department printed in white on the back. There was also some elbow and knee pads attached. As they walked back into the large open room, they were surprised to see that Midoriya had also changed from his suit and was waiting for them. He was dressed in a black tank top, black workout shorts with black leggings underneath that were cut with holes for the heels and toes, and a single fingerless glove on his right hand opposite his gauntlet. "Wait, are we training with you?" Ida was surprised when he expected their first training exercise would be against some of those robots of his. Even Todoroki was caught off guard, but it didn't seem that odd to him. Uraraka, of course, wasn't that surprised really. Before gaining his position, he had helped train her in some new fighting moves and other ways to use her quirk. "Well, of course," Izuku said nonchalantly. "I believe in a more hands-on approach. Plus, this is the best way for me to see how much you've improved since the junkyard and what areas you need to work on." He gestured for the three of them to step forward. Once they did, the metal panels they stood on were raised about a foot high along with a large even expanse. The whole thing clearly resembled the same square fighting platform from the Udata Sports Festival. "Now first, each of you is going to have some one-on-one spars, and hopefully with time permitting we'll have a group exercise." Izuku smiled warmly at his knights. "So who wants to volunteer to go first?" Without hesitation, Shoto Todoroki stepped forward. The other two stepped off the ring to watch from the sidelines. "Now then, the rules are simple. Free use of your quirk, first to be knocked out of the ring or pinned down loses," the green-haired gauntlet wielder explained. "Also, if you can't go on, feel free to tag out with someone else." "Can we start this already?" Shoto asked impatiently. Shoto versus Izuku. "Ready whenever you are." Izuku barely got the words out when a glacier of ice suddenly erupted towards him. "Whoa!" He shattered the ice. Was a simple one for all-powered backhand. "Not very sportsmanlike." "I wasn't aware you wanted a fair fight," Todoroki remarked sarcastically. "I don't. In fact, come at me with every trick you have," Midoriya taunted. A moment later, a torrent of flames shot towards him like a spear. Izuku leaned back to dodge, but was unprepared for the floor to suddenly turn icy, nearly making him slip and fall. Correcting his balance, the gauntlet user quickly melted the ice using the reality stone. Todoroki, not willing to give his opponent a moment of breath, followed up with a ball of fire, hurled at Izuku's chest. The green-haired teenager used his right hand to catch it instead of his gauntlet-protected left, much to the shock of his opponent and the two spectators. Energy conversion. Black and purple energy bolts emerged from his hand and arm, attaching to the ball of fire like tentacles. The bicolor-haired boy watched with curiosity and unease as the heat from his attack was sucked away until it fizzled out into mere embers. Seeing the look on his opponent's face, Midoriya decided to satisfy his curiosity. "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't think I ever explained. The Soul Stone allows for me to use any quirk that I've taken." Izuku smirked at him. "That was one of them, called energy conversion. It converts any energy, heat, electricity, or even kinetic, and converts into another form of energy. For example," he held his hand out and created a ball of raw power, glowing a light purple with black sparks dancing around it. "Catch!" he called, hurling it at Todoroki without hesitation. "Damn it!" Shoto scowled as he erected a wall of ice. The ball of energy impacted it, nearly shattering it if the dual quirk user didn't reinforce his wall with more ice. The fight continued on with Todoroki attempting to gain the upper hand, yet to his frustration it seemed Midoriya had a counter to everything he did. Any ice that came near him was either shattered with his near all-might level of strength or melted into water by the power of the reality stone. Fire was also useless, for the heat was always leached away by that energy-converting quirk Midoriya claimed to have appropriated and thrown back at him. "Don't tell me you haven't learned anything since the last time we fought," Izuku taunted harshly with a disappointed gaze. "Actually I did," Shoto said as he pointed both his hands at Midoriya. First he cooled the air between himself and his opponent. Then he followed up by rapidly heating the air. The end result was a large superheated blast sent directly at the gauntlet user. Izuku took the blast head out of sheer respect for the other boy's inventive attack. Using the space stone he projected his protective barrier outwards in front of him like an umbrella, amplifying it with the power stone to tank the other boy's attack. The collision nearly blew away the two onlookers from the sidelines. "Very good." Izuku complimented him as he stepped out of a cloud of smoke. "You've been learning how to use your fire, I see." He put emphasis on the word "your," reassuring Shoto again that it was still his power and not Endeavor's. "But so have I." Black sparks formed around his right hand before it was engulfed in flames, hellflame to be exact. With what was once the number 2 hero's quirk, Izuku launched an arc of fire at Shoto. Todoroki panicked for a moment seeing those familiar flames bearing down on him. The very sight of it was giving him the worst kind of déjà vu. However, instead of cowering in fear he faced it head-on like Midoriya always did. Using as much ice he could produce, Shoto completely overwhelmed the fire, nearly giving himself frostbite in the process. Unfortunately he was too drained to dodge or block the oncoming foot that kicked him in the chest and pinned him to the metallic floor. So then, Izuku smiled as he kept him down with his foot. "What did you learn?" "You're too powerful." Shoto glared at him in frustration at not being able to put a scratch on his opponent. It made him feel so weak after everything he's been through. "There's no such thing as too powerful," Izuku corrected him. "This is what it's like to fight me when I'm prepared. Last time we fought I was caught off guard and had to improvise. This time I was mentally prepared for everything you could throw at me." He bent down and poked Todoroki in the forehead. "That is your greatest tool. Any idiot can throw their quirk around, but if you know not just the ins and outs of your own quirk but your opponent's as well, you'll always have the advantage." He removed his foot and extended his hand out to help the other boy up. "You've improved in leaps, I would say." Todoroki willingly took his hand as well as his advice. "Now who's next?" Midoriya glanced towards Uraraka and Ida. "Uraraka, a fight between us wouldn't be a good representation of your new skill set. How about you fight Ida here? Ochako versus Tenya." The two stepped up to the platform as Izuku and Shoto walked off of it. Uraraka was smiling and bubbly as she always was even when facing her friend Ida. "Aren't you forgetting something?" Midoriya asked. "Oh, my staff." Uraraka wanted to smack herself for being so forgetful. "It's all right." Izuku made a small portal directly above her. The new staff that he made for her, since her previous one was confiscated by her former school, came falling out of it. Without even looking, Ochako caught it with one hand, giving it a quick spin as she turned to face her opponent. Ida almost took a step back at the expression change on her face. She looked so serious and focused, the complete opposite of how she looked a moment ago. "And, begin." Izuku gave them the go-ahead to start the fight. Ida wasted no time and rushed at her with the speed his quirk granted him. When he was inches away from Uraraka, at the last possible second the brown-haired girl dipped forward out of the way of his charge. With a single swipe of her staff she nearly bashed his face in. "Stay on your toes, Ida," Midoriya advised from the sidelines. "She's quick on her feet," Ida thought as he evaded her swings as best as he could. Quicker than she ever was before. The gravity girl suddenly pole vaulted over him using her metal staff. Immediately Tenya whipped around expecting her to be mounting an attack from behind, but was caught off guard when she was not there. A grapple claw attached to a tether wrapping around his torso was his only clue to her whereabouts. Following the line he found her floating up in the air above him. She must have used her quirk on herself the moment she jumped over his body. Newton drop. Uraraka shouted the name of her new move as she yanked herself down at Tenya while deactivating her quirk. Ida was so taken by surprise that he couldn't stop the feet that plowed into his chest, knocking the air out of his lungs and slamming him on the floor. Ochako pinned his body down with her own, placing her right elbow on his throat. "All right, that's enough." Izuku called the match. "You did well, both of you, but clearly Uraraka is the victor." The gravity girl stood, removing her arm and grapple staff from the taller boy's body. Ochako reached her hand out to help him up. Tenya, being a good sport, took her offered hand. "I didn't expect the fight to be that short," Todoroki remarked. "I did," Izuku smirked. "She doesn't like to drag battles out." He knew that much about her. "Now then, I think I've seen enough. Todoroki, you need more close combat training. Ida, you rely too much on speed and lack a proper defense. Uraraka, I've already been working on what you'll need, so just keep up what you've been working on." "Why aren't those villains here training with us?" Tenya suddenly asked. It didn't seem fair that they were getting special treatment, while the villains that Midoriya recruited are out doing who knows what. "Oh, they'll be here." Izuku turned his gaze towards the engine quirk user. "Stain is just giving them a quick crash course." His phone suddenly went off and he promptly answered it. "Ah, good, she's here." "Who's here?" the dual quirk user wanted to know. "You'll meet her soon. Let's take a short lunch break everyone while I go get her settled in." Izuku started walking away. "The robots will escort you to the mess hall, after that we'll get back to more training." He dismissed them as he opened a portal and stepped through it. One of the Titan robots entered the training room. This one was white, unlike the typical black ones. "I don't know about you two boys, but I could use a bite." Uraraka smiled before making her way to their mechanical escort, leaving her staff behind on the floor. The other two begrudgingly followed after her. The lab? It's like a toy store. May happily moved around her new lab, examining all the state-of-the-art tools and equipment that was now at her disposal. With all this, she could make the ultimate babies. "I figured you'd like it." Izuku smiled, watching his friend and colleague enjoy her new workspace. "Sorry about the Hero Public Safety Commission grilling you. Part of the agreement I have with the government is that they get to screen all the employees I hire." It honestly frustrated him how the commission was doing everything it could to try and slow him down, rather than work with him. Luckily for Izuku, his 6 knights don't count as employees and thus don't have to go through that process. "It's all right. Not like I have anything to hide." Mei shrugged as she examined one of the power drills. "Now then, I think it's time I explain why I need your expertise and my little project." Walking over to what looked like a table, it was actually a large digital screen. Activating it with a simple touch, the screen lit up, showing schematics and blueprints. "Oh, what's this?" Mei was intrigued by what she was seeing. "This is what you'll be working on in addition to the support gear I need. With All Might on the verge of retiring, the people will need a new symbol that they can get behind." Izuku explained smoothly. "This will be a temporary solution until a new human hero can rise to fill the void." What he was showing her was the plans for a new Titan robot. A more powerful, unique Titan, designed to be better than any other. "I call it Nemesis." The mess hall. "This place is too big for just a few people." The 3 young heroes in training sat together alone in a big empty room filled with unoccupied eating tables. "Izuku eventually wants more people to join the organization," Uraraka explained while she ate. "He built this whole facility to accommodate the future members. He really thinks ahead, doesn't he?" Todoroki commented. "Yeah." The brown-haired girl glanced over to Ida, who was eating quietly while staring off at the walls. "Are you alright, Ida? I didn't hurt you too badly, did I?" "And no, it's alright." Tenya suddenly snapped to attention. "I underestimated you, so it's my fault, not yours." He promptly apologized for what he viewed as his own blunder. "I was just thinking about how powerful Midoriya really is compared to what he's shown us. I couldn't even land a good hit on him." Shoto could admit that he was somewhat frustrated by that. "Plus, I get the feeling that he wasn't going all out. You haven't seen what he's really capable of." A voice from behind their table interrupted them. They turned around to see the villain known as Dabi standing there with a tray of food. "I was there when he fought against All Might. Trust me when I say he's a lot more powerful than you imagine." Without invitation, he sat down next to Todoroki. "He's also super smart." Someone else spoke up as another person sat at their table right next to Uraraka. The gravity quirk user turned to see Toga beaming at her with her enlarged canines. "Toga," Uraraka greeted rather coldly. She'd met the other girl before and didn't exactly hit it off with her. "Ochako," the blonde girl said in a sickly sweet tone. "He didn't waste any time, I see." Stain appeared as well, plopping down in the seat across from Tenya. "Put you right into training." Ida glared at him through his glasses. "I get the impression that you still don't like me, Ingenium Jr. What was your first clue?" Dabi smirked as he watched the interaction. Still mad about your brother? The former hero killer finally glanced up at him. Even though he's going to be able to walk again from what I hear? You're the one who put him in that situation in the first place, Tenya practically spat. Yeah, I did, Stain sighed. I won't apologize though, and I certainly don't feel bad for what I did, but I will concede that I was wrong. Everyone stopped and turned to look at serial killer with shock. Midoriya proved to me that his method is better. Why kill fake heroes when you can expose them and make them live the rest of their lives in shame? He grinned, remembering the video of what happened to Endeavor. He got a copy of it from Izuku so he could watch it over and over again. Speaking of fake heroes, how is your old man doing these days? Dabi suddenly asked, turning to face Shoto while he ate. Still whining about losing his quirk and job, the dual quirk user supplied in an even tone, not really caring about his father anymore. That's good. Dabi almost seemed gleeful at hearing that. Why do you care so much? Shoto asked the patched-up man. Let's just say your father and I have a very personal history, Dabi said while taking a bite of his lunch. Are you a villain he fought in the past or something? Shoto inquired with a narrow gaze. The last thing he needed was someone coming after him for what Endeavor did to them. Not really, but from my perspective he was more the villain in our relationship, Dabi smirked at him. While the two of them were having a stare down, Ochako and Toga were having their own little chat. So what have you and Izuku been doing all these months? The blonde psychotic girl asked. I hardly ever see him, and I hear you two have been hanging around together. If you must know, we've just been training and I've also been acting as his assistant until he hires someone to replace me, Ochako said in a matter-of-fact voice, not leaving any room for it to be misconstrued. Training, huh? So that means you got to put your hands on his body a lot. Himiko grinned widely, making the other girl blush. Wait. It's not like that, Uraraka stammered out. You're blushing so much, but that must mean that, Toga gasped loudly. You like him too? She accused with a laugh. Before the gravity quirk user could deny her words, a portal opened up in the middle of the mess hall and Izuku poked his head through. Are you guys ready to go again? He asked. Midoriya looked to the table where his knights were seated. Ida was glaring at a nonchalant Stain. Todoroki had his cold gaze pointed at a smirking Dabi, and Uraraka was blushing bright red while Himiko was giggling next her. What I miss? Nothing. Ochako answered while she tried to hide her red face. Okay, Izuku seemed skeptical but let it go. Back to the training room then. His head went back into the warp gate as it closed. After you, Dabi gestured with his arm while still smirking at the youngest Todoroki. Training room later. Alright, this time I want Ida, Todoroki and Dabi to come at me all at once while the rest of you wait on the sidelines. Izuku picked his next sparring victims, as he liked to call them. After several hours of making them fight one-on-one and switching partners, he decided now was a good time for a group match to see how well they did working together against a single overpowered opponent. 3 against 1? That doesn't seem fair, the black-haired fire user raised a brow at the challenge. You're right, it isn't fair, Izuku shrugged. You 3 won't even be able to touch me, he taunted with a small amount of arrogance. I'm not going to underestimate him this time, Tenya thought as he stared at his leader. I'll fight Midoriya with everything I have and finally see how big the gap between us really is. Is everybody ready? Izuku stood at the opposite end of the ring. Dabi got into a prepared stance, summoning blue flames in the palms of both hands. Shoto covered his right arm in an icy mist while his left was engulfed in fire. Tenya's leg engines roared to life as he stood ready to charge in. Gooden, let's go. The 3 boys launched everything at him while the green-haired boy just smirked at their attacks. Infinity Gauntlet, 100% output. Each of his opponents was blown back by the rush of energy and power that exploded out their leader. Izuku would show them all just how strong he really was with the full power of his invention. There were times when Dabi looked in the mirror, he sometimes tried to remember what he originally looked like. It was at those times when he thought hard, he could see past the black hair, stitches and burned patches of skin and see that red-haired boy from long ago. On bad days he would sneer at that weak, pathetic boy. On really bad days he would breathe a sigh of sadness for just a moment. Tuya Todoroki, that was his name once upon a time. Born with an exceptionally powerful fire quirk, potentially stronger than his father's, so he was told. Before his youngest brother developed his dual quirk, Tuya was Dad's favorite. Favorite? How Dabi hated that title. In a normal family maybe the favorite son would get special treatment, food and gifts. In the Todoroki household, being the favorite meant strict training from dear old dad, violence, pressure, verbal and sometimes physical abuse. Mom couldn't do anything or she too would feel his wrath. He was just a kid, yet whenever he failed to live up to Dad's expectations he was called weak and useless. As if Endeavor had the right to mock weakness when he couldn't even surpass All Might. Tuya finally couldn't take it anymore. He wanted out one way or another. One night he finally decided to just end it all. Leaving a note for his siblings to find, he snuck out of the house. A young child of 12 wandered the city streets in the dead of night, looking for the best place to die and be free from this burden. He found it in the form of a bridge. Staring down into the dark water of the canal, Tuya found that he couldn't bring himself to do it. It wasn't that he didn't want to die, but he wanted to live to see his father's reputation ruined. That's when an idea popped into his head. He knew his suicide would warrant some form of investigation. They would look into the number 2 hero's home life. They would find out what he did and still does to his wife and children. They would plaster it everywhere. Everyone would know the truth. His rank would plummet and Tuya would have his well-deserved justice. Making up his mind, the young red-headed boy took off his shirt and shoes and tossed them over the bridge into the river. The police would need to find something to confirm that he did indeed jump. Tuya then vanished into the seedier parts of the city, stealing a cap and hoodie to hide himself, and simply waited for the fireworks to begin. Perhaps when Endeavor's career was in ashes he would come out of hiding just to laugh and reveal that he was the architect of his ultimate humiliation. A few days passed, yet none of the things he imagined happened. Instead, his death was labeled as a tragic accident. His 12-year-old mind had gravely miscalculated just how corrupt Endeavor really was and what he would do to keep his reputation safe. Sinking so low as to not even report his own son was missing but dead. What happened to the note he left for his siblings? Why didn't they go public with it or tell Mom? Did their father force them all to silence? He certainly had the power and pull to do something like that. Tuya just couldn't believe that there wasn't a shred of honor or humanity in that man, to do this to his own family. Treating his own son like a disposable toothbrush to throw in the trash and replace. Time passed and a funeral was held. The boy read all about it from a stolen newspaper. People actually consoled that bastard for the loss of his firstborn son. Even All Might showed up and offered his sympathy. Not a single person save for his family knew the truth, and no one ever would. It was then that Tuya learned that there was no justice in the world. If someone who everyone praised as such a great hero could get away with this, then what was a hero anyway? True heroes didn't abuse their family and worse, not feel a shred of remorse or guilt. That man was a fraud and there was nothing the redhead could about it. He couldn't go back now. There was no telling what Endeavor would do to him if it turned out he was alive. He might kill his son himself for real, just to cover his own lies. Hiding out, he spent most of his time doing odd jobs for local drug dealers and scumbags in the darker parts of the city. He lived in an abandoned train yard, using an old rusted caboose as a makeshift home. After about a year of this, he could finally afford to change his identity. He heard that there was a guy who possessed a quirk that could alter a person's appearance, and he did so for untraceable cash. He worked out of back alley surgery room in a moldy building. Tuya saved up enough from his jobs to afford the hair color change at least. When he went back months later with more money, the place was gone. He had heard that some underground hero named Eraserhead arrested the man with appearance-altering quirk and shut his whole business down. With no other option, the now 16-year-old Tuya had to do the rest himself. The pain was excruciating. Using his own quirk, he burned parts of skin, going a little too far at times, but the damage was done. The older he got, the more he resembled that man, and he hated it, so of course he wanted all likeness and similar traits obliterated. It would be a few years later that he would get metal piercings that resembled staples. The first time he burned someone to death had been sort of an accident. He'd been having a bad day. First he got screwed over on a job. Turns out it was a setup and the heroes were waiting to capture a bunch of small-time thugs. Tuya just barely escaped, and when he returned to the garage, the guy who hired him was long gone. He was most likely an undercover cop or hero the whole time. On top of that, Endeavor was just commended for his long successful career and heroic deeds. They even gave him a medal for his services. If the public knew the truth about him, they'd spit in his face whenever they walked by him. All the rage he felt lashed out when he was suddenly attacked by a group of thugs looking for some easy cash. Since this was the bad part of the city, the likelihood of hero showing up to stop a mugging was pretty much non-existent, so these muggings happened quite often. Having had enough, Tuya immediately exploded at the one with blades for fingers as he lunged towards him. His flames were so hot and intense that they turned blue and fried the cretin to a blackened crisp. The other scumbags ran off after what he did to their friend, letting the young man take a good long look at his handiwork. Tuya practically cremated him. He was revolted at first, but then he felt oddly relieved. The guy would have killed him if given the chance, and he merely defended himself. Who knows how many people he killed with his quirk, he probably deserved this. Word eventually spread. Just a bunch of overblown rumors in Tuya's opinion. They called him the Fire Demon, the Burner, the Blue Flame. The only nickname he sort of liked was the Cremator. It was that word that gave him the idea for his new name. Dabi, that's what he started introducing himself as. He spent the next few years wandering around burning any creep that crossed his path looking to start something with him. The news, he despised them for taking bribes from heroes to keep certain stories quiet. Every once in a while though they did something right. This time they spread the message of the hero killer. They were quickly stopped by the government of course, but it was too late. Websites were created, posters were made, and even merchandise was being sold in stores based off the serial killer. At first Dabi assumed this guy was just another fad that would come and go without causing any real change to society. Heroes would still remain corrupt, real justice didn't exist anyway. Stain was different though. He actually left a mark on society with his crusade to eradicate every false hero. Dabi actually applauded his efforts. Maybe sooner or later people would start to question their precious heroes, and maybe they would start to look a little closer at those they worship. He didn't have any hope though, but he'd carry on that man's creed regardless. Perhaps now was the time to stand for something. When Dabi first joined the League of Villains he had very low expectations. It wasn't the first organized group of villains that claimed to be different than the others, and he had a feeling it would probably end up just like the rest. Their leader Shigaraki was an irritating man-child and not to mention unpleasant to look at. Then there was Toga, a psychotic blood-obsessed little bitch. The smoky bartender Kurojiiri, the ridiculous clowns known as Compress and Twice, that androgynous creep Magna, and the hero killer cosplayer Spinner. There was also the mysterious voice over the monitor screen that Shigaraki hung on his every word named Sensei. All in all they were a real motley group of second-rate villains. The first time he met Izuku Midoriya aka Apotheosis was interesting to say the least. He remembered that alias from some time ago. The supposed genius strategist, his name quickly spread throughout the villain underworld in such a short time. Last he had heard was that some Yakuza big shot in a bird mask was looking for him. Imagine his surprise when it turned out Apotheosis was just some kid that now worked for the League of Villains. As soon as Dabi laid eyes on him he immediately dismissed him as weak. The way he cowered before Shigaraki when the handman had him pinned to the wall by his throat didn't help his opinion of him either. However the boy was smart enough to placate Shigaraki. That still didn't impress Dabi though, and he chose to ignore the kid, until Izuku approached him. He watched as the boy easily disabled Toga with just a few simple moves, but it was when he mentioned hanging out with Stain that Dabi became interested. During meetings at the League's bar Izuku would talk to him about the hero killer, his ideals and beliefs. Apparently the kid had similar ideals, but believed in different methods. For example, he was against killing the fake heroes. Izuku preferred them to live in shame and humiliation. To him it was a greater punishment than to die for misrepresenting the title. He eventually grew curious enough to ask what the boy's quirk was, but to Dabi's surprise he was quirkless. Personally Dabi wasn't a bigot and didn't hold Izuku's quirkless status against him, but being realistic, what could he really do with only a smart brain and no power to fall back on? It wasn't until the attack on the Udata training camp that he got to see how Izuku's intelligence worked out in the field. He was easily able to make that Bakugu kid they were targeting lose his temper, and that strange device of his redirected the boy's attack back at his own allies. Dabi didn't see much of Izuku after their first successful mission. All Might and other heroes raided their base, forced that sensei guy to reveal himself, and then the League went into hiding. Shigaraki called him after the fight, but the green-haired genius wouldn't be returning. It was hard to understand the handman's incoherent furious rambling, but what Dabi could glean was that Izuku was going off on his own for now. Then, that day came. Himiko received a call from Izuku and the girl left saying her love needed her. As if Izuku would ever let someone as crazy as her in his pants. Dabi chuckled at the thought. He remembered later that Kurojiiri and Compress were watching the portable television in their new hideout, keeping an eye on the news to see if the heroes were on their trail. Not that they would allow the media to post something like that if they were. Kurojiiri called Shigaraki over when they saw something interesting. Glancing over their shoulder with mild intrigue, he noticed a picture of Izuku Midoriya being displayed on screen. Based off what the news was reporting, it seems little Izuku outed himself as a villain. That didn't seem right. The boy always kept his identity and involvement with the League secret, so why would he reveal himself to All Might of all people? It was then the media played the footage of happened at Geonosis. Quirkless Izuku floating in the air, combating All Might and blowing away heroes and cars with a simple snap of his fingers. He even thwarted that bastard Endeavor's flames and he made it look so easy. After that he tore down the company's building and escaped. The report also said that Kamui Woods and Edgeshot were badly injured by that very same quirkless boy. It seemed almost impossible. How did he get so powerful? When did he become so powerful? These were some of the questions that Dabi and the rest of the League wanted to know. Especially Shigaraki, with how much the guy kept ranting and raving. Later during the night they were sent a location, some trash-covered beach. It was there they got to see some of the kid's power up close. It all came from a device that he wore on his left hand. Pretty obvious and hard not to notice the shiny new gauntlet the kid was sporting. After that Izuku went into hiding for a little bit, calling on Toga and Dabi for assistance in protecting those stones that powered his gauntlet while they were being made. Toga screwed up, but Dabi was able to accomplish his job, handing what the green-haired teen called the Power Stone over. After seeing how he was able to blow All Might away, he understood why it was called that. He didn't stick around to watch the rest of the fight, but he saw the footage. The whole world saw Izuku expose All Might's true form. It was amazing. In one fell swoop he shook society's faith in their number one hero. Pandemonium was the next stage of Izuku's plan. First he supplied villains with his intellect and assistance, then he helped the heroes out by slowing down and thwarting the villains. This just further threw the nation into chaos, creating the perfect opportunity for him to petition the Prime Minister with a solution. Izuku was given exactly what he wanted: control over the heroes, the ability and political power to decide who was worthy of the title. The first he passed judgment on was Endeavor. Izuku humiliated and defeated him without lifting a finger, proving that quirks are nothing to his science and intelligence. Dabi got a sick joy watching the footage of that man getting the shit kicked out of him by the kid's robots over and over again. The green-haired gauntlet user didn't waste any time. He built himself a base of operations, passed judgment on 3 more fake heroes and brought order to society on the brink of chaos with his titans. Izuku accomplished more than the League of Villains ever did in such a short amount of time as well. Of course Dabi took the offer to join him. He had already proved to be a more competent leader than Shigaraki, so the decision was no-brainer. It was then Izuku dropped another surprise on him. The infamous hero killer Stain was now working for him as some sort of secret inquisitor that brought fake heroes to him to be punished by having their quirks removed. There was more though. Izuku wanted Dabi, Toga and Stain to keep an eye on the villains. He wanted to always know what they were up to so that he could better keep the hero society in his control. What Dabi didn't expect was for Shoto Todoroki, the son of that monster, to be a part of the kids' organization. He also didn't expect his youngest sibling to be nothing like their father. Unlike Endeavor, Shoto was willing to change and better himself and therefore become a better hero. He also did what Dabi dreamed of doing when he was a kid, and that was tell the old man to shove it. Part of him wanted to tell Shoto the truth and come clean, but he reminded himself that Tuya Todoroki was dead and he was Dabi now. Still, he was always curious about what became of his siblings and their mother. He didn't even know what hospital she was in. Things were changing so fast and Dabi was struggling to keep up. Stain was putting him and the psycho girl through the ringer with his training, while Izuku did the same with his 3 prospective heroes. Stain was incredibly strict and harsh as a teacher. He didn't pull any punches in sparring exercises and didn't waste any time laying Dabi out on the floor then berating him by calling him just a punk with a flashy quirk. Toga didn't struggle as much as he did since she was more accustomed to close-range hand-to-hand combat. He was starting to feel useless, while watching everyone getting stronger while his progress was nowhere near as extensive as theirs. He voiced this concern just once to Izuku and the boy just chuckled, saying that Dabi was already really strong, so of course his progress would look little in comparison. Even going as far to liken it to leveling up in a video game like Shigaraki used to do. Izuku told him not to worry too much about it, but Dabi wanted to be better, he needed to be stronger. He owed it to Izuku for creating real justice in this society and putting a stop to the fake heroes like Endeavor. He had to help him protect this justice. Present time. Are you sure you want to do this? Izuku asked as he followed Dabi into the training room. These are the same robots that took down Endeavor. You could say they are tailor-made to fight people with quirks like yours, Dabi. You're the one who said the best way to get stronger is to go beyond my limits, the dark-haired young man smirked. No Udade says that. That plus ultra thing they keep spouting, the gauntlet user shrugged. It doesn't apply to people without quirks though. Sadly none of the lessons that school teach apply to the average quirkless person, but the whole going beyond thing is something I can agree with. He looked down at his device as he walked. After all, I went about as plus ultra as I could possibly go thanks to this. Entering the large training room, Dabi spotted 3 red Titan robots standing there in the center waiting for him. Have fun, Izuku turned and with a last wave and left him alone in the chamber. Observation room. So what do you think? Stain asked, standing in front of large monitor screen that displayed what was currently about to happen in the training room. He seems more confident. Izuku stood next him. He was always a bit cocky before, but he seems more focused along with that. I suppose that's your doing. The punk is strong, but if he really pushes himself he'll be even stronger, the hero killer commented. That's why I suggested he do this. Oh, so this was your idea? Midoriya looked to his inquisitor with curiosity. Well, this should be interesting then. He reached over and pushed button to activate the robots. Training room. Dabi stared down the Titans as they suddenly came to life. The 3 turned their bodies in unison to face him and began stomping towards their target without a moment of hesitation. When they were close they reached out to grab him. That was when Dabi struck the ground between them, creating a wall of blue fire to obstruct the machine's visions. One of the Titans tore through the flames to find the target was gone. Hey metalhead! Dabi called from behind before blasting it with a torrent of flames. He noticed the other 2 approaching and used his quirk to launch himself away with his other hand. With all 3 of them close together, Dabi unleashed a tidal wave of fire at the machines. The Titans were pushed back at first but soon started marching through the onslaught of heat flames until one of them was standing in front of him. Guh! He was punched hard in the gut by a metal fist, followed by another fist to his face when he was distracted that knocked him off his feet. He tried to get up but the tall menacing robots surrounded him and starting raining blows down on his body. He tried the same strategy to get some distance, but the machines would always chase him down, push through his fire and beat him down. The repetition of failure was starting to piss Dabi off. As the Titans kicked the crap out of him, the fire wielder was starting to think that maybe he was weak after all, just like his father said. Observation room. That didn't last long, Izuku commented, not sounding all that surprised over the outcome. Give him a moment, Stain kept watching. Training room. Okay, I've had enough of this shit. Dabi hated feeling weak. When he glanced up at the Titan, all he saw was Endeavor looking down on him. Ha! With a mighty shout, Dabi stood up, unleashing an inferno all around him. The robots were momentarily pushed back, but renewed their assault. Only to find their target missing. A whistle caught the first one's attention, its head doing a complete 180. Dabi leaped at the machine, hands covered in blue fire. He grabbed the robot's head and pressed his thumbs into the red glowing eyes. He didn't stop until he saw sparks burst from the holes, telling him that the Titan was blinded now. From what Izuku told him some time ago, the quirk detecting scanner was behind the eyes of each robot, so with that now also out of commission, it was completely in the dark. It could still hear him, but that wouldn't help it over the sound of roaring flames. One tried to punch him in the face, but he took the hit. Smirking with blood dripping down his face, Dabi created another wall of fire between himself and the mechanical soldiers. With the power of his quirk, he sent the fire that surrounded him in every direction, creating a storm of flames. Rafag! Dabi roared his lungs out as he blasted the fireproof robots with everything he had. The Titans were pushed back, trying their best to fight through the flames. It looked like a group of 3 men were trying their hardest to walk through a raging hurricane. The fire user screamed louder as he pushed his quirk past its limits, turning up the heat and intensity even further. Much to the shock of Izuku, who watched from the safety of the observation room, the fire-resistant armor of the Red Titans was starting to melt. Observation room. I think we've seen enough now. Izuku's right hand reached over to the red button on the control panel that said extinguish, that would douse the training room with water. Before he could push it, his wrist was quickly grabbed and stopped by the hero killer. Not so fast, Stain said as he continued to watch the screen with a smirk. Who are we to stop him now that his heart is fully in it? Izuku looked at him, but then shrugged and let the inferno continue. What's going on? Izuku turned around at the sudden voice to see Shoto walking through the doors of the observation room. Dabi wanted to find his limit and go beyond it, he answered. You might want to come see this boy, Stain said without turning around. This is what it looks like when you give it your all. Todoroki glared at the hero killer, but grew curious to see what Dabi was capable of. The guy was always giving him weird looks during meetings and training sessions. Honestly, it was starting to annoy him, and Shoto made a mental note to confront him about it in the future. The three of them continued to watch as Dabi's demonic blue flames slowly melted through the armor of robots. Even the systems that released pressurized air from between the metal plating to further shield them from heat and fire, along with the rapid cooling mechanisms, were no match for the raging furnace that the patch-faced man now wielded, and were quickly overloaded. With nothing to protect them from his quirk, the Titans were fried down to their circuitry, even to their very core, causing all three of them to explode, leaving nothing but burned piles of scrap. Dabi eventually calmed down, letting his fire slowly subside. He stood there in the middle of the training room, now nothing more than a giant oven, breathing heavily. His shirt and coat was turned to ash, leaving his torso exposed. Izuku and Stained glanced at each other, with the younger of the two mouthing the word "wow." Even Shoto was floored by how powerful Dabi's own flame quirk was. It made him wonder if the fire side of his own quirk could have been that powerful had he not neglected it for so long. "Wait for it," Stain remarked as they observed Dabi suddenly become still, the collapse into unconsciousness. "And there it is. I think I'll take back some of the things I said about this punk now." The hero killer was happy to see his trainee finally cut loose. This organization didn't need half-hearted fools slowing them down. "Yeah, I would if I were you," Izuku just laughed and opened a portal to retrieve the dark cremator, all the while finally deciding on the perfect code name for him. All Might let out a weary sigh as he sat in his chair quietly, skinny and shriveled. He looked down the hall to his left, spotting a pair of suited security guards. Then he looked to his right and spotted another pair at the other end. After going through numerous security checkpoints, he was finally allowed in the Prime Minister's office. Unfortunately, even his position as the #1 hero wasn't enough to get him an audience with Minister Akira Toriyama immediately like he wanted. He had to wait a few weeks for a scheduled appointment, but even then the minister was a bit reluctant to meet with him. Especially considering that there was no telling where Midoriya's eyes and ears were these days. "Prime Minister Toriyama will see you now." The voice of one of the aides spoke as he appeared in the hall. Toshinori stood up and fixed his tie quickly before following the young woman. As he glanced up, he noticed the many sensors in the ceiling that detected the usage of quirks. When they reached the office, two bodyguards quietly nodded at the hero and opened the double doors. "Hello, Yagi Toshinori." Prime Minister Toriyama greeted him. Better known as All Might. The doors closed and locked behind the hero as he walked up to the desk and gave a respectful bow to the middle-aged dark-haired man. "Minister Toriyama." Toshinori greeted back. "Please, I should be the one bowing to you." Toriyama stood up and gestured towards the seat. "I'm sorry you had to wait so long to get here, but as you can imagine, I'm a very busy man. Now, when you requested a meeting with me weeks ago, you didn't specify what exactly you wanted to speak to me about. I wanted to keep that vague lest the wrong person find out, but I think you know what I'm here to discuss." The blonde skinny man gave him an accusing gaze. The minister sighed as he reached into a drawer of his desk and pulled out a bottle of alcohol. "I was afraid it was that." Pouring himself a glass before offering the hero one. "Brandy? No thank you. My health doesn't allow it." Toshinori politely refused the drink. "Now about this problem. What's there to talk about?" The minister took a deep sip of his drink. "Midoriya knows what he's doing, and the villains are running scared now that we have their best on our side. I assure you the only side that boy is on is his own," the gaunt man argued. Toriyama's lips folded inward like he wanted to argue back but couldn't. He reached into another drawer of his desk and pulled out a small chrome device the size and shape of a pen with a red blinking light at the top. "Clearly there's much you want to say, and there's much I want to know." He pushed a button on the side of his device and the flashing stopped and started glowing green. "This is a nifty little gadget that only myself and other high-ranking government officials are allowed to have. As long as it's on, all transceiver signals in and out of this room are jammed," the minister explained. "If this place were bugged without my knowledge, rest assured all that third party will get is static." Now Yagi understood what was said here will stay between the two of them. Izuku would never know what went on here if he was spying on them. "Tell me everything, because I need to know how this all began if I'm going to help you." Thus Yagi Toshinori told him everything. All for one, one for all, the path of succession with the power, his master Nana Shimura, how he became the #1 hero, and finally the first time he met Izuku Midoriya. The blonde older man didn't spare any details in the story. The minister sat there and listened patiently, taking a few sips of his drink here and there. When he was finished, Toshinori leaned back in his chair to let that all sink in. The minister made a bridge out of his hands as he contemplated all this. I did know a bit about All for One already, all the previous prime ministers did as well. That man has been our country's dirty little secret for over 100 years. They never let the other countries know that there was a villain that had a quirk that let him steal quirks. The secret was kind of out thanks to Midoriya though. As for the boy. He sighed before taking another sip. Look, I'm not going to point the finger of shame at you. You're probably getting enough of that from your colleagues that know your secret. Toshinori frowned at how accurate that was. How could you have known? How could you have possibly known that what you said to Midoriya was the last straw in a life of misery and oppression? Still, I should have said something else. I should have lied and said he could be a quirkless hero. Toshinori looked angry at himself. Would you have allowed a quirkless child into their hero program? Toriyama asked. No. Would any other school? Toshinori paused for a moment then answered truthfully. No. Exactly. Had you lied to him, Midoriya would have done his best to get in, but he wouldn't have made it in due to his quirkless status. The Prime Minister went on to explain in detail this alternate what-if scenario. However, he would have blamed himself and gone on the rest of his miserable life always seeing himself as inferior and working a dead-end job until he committed suicide before age 30. No one would have cared, he'd just be a footnote in the obituaries if it was slow news day and society would keep going. That was hauntingly detailed. The gaunt man was taken aback by how far that went. That's because I've seen that story before, many times. The minister took a big gulp of his alcohol. It's the story of the average quirkless life. I didn't know it was that bad. Toshinori looked regretful that he never did anything to stop this. There's a reason the quirkless percentage of the population is decreasing every year. It's partially due to them offing themselves due to the ridicule and isolation they feel. That was harsh but true. And nobody cares. Why should they care when heroes are around to care for them? But heroes don't actually care, do they? He chuckled ruefully. Do you see the problem now, Toshinori? That's what Izuku Midoriya is trying to fix. I understand, I really do. I think some of these changes are needed, but he's going about it the wrong way. Toshinori argued. All this aggressive control, humiliating anyone who doesn't agree with him, taking the quirks of heroes. Just be glad he's only taking the quirks of heroes that he finds unworthy and not just any that he fancies like All for One did. The Prime Minister supplied. We really got lucky with All for One though. He was content to rule from the shadows. The few that did know of him feared him and those that only heard of that man wondered if he even existed at all. There has to be a way to stop Midoriya. The hero quickly changed the subject to get to the root as to why he was here. The minister sighed again and finished the rest of his glass off. There is no stopping him. That boy is too smart and too powerful to be stopped at this point. It was harsh, but it was true. What could All Might with his rapidly draining power do? I don't believe that. You're the Prime Minister, there has to be something you can do. Toshinori wondered. Isn't there anything you know that can be used against him? There might be one way. Toriyama refilled his glass as he contemplated the situation. You would have to restore your image while simultaneously diminish Midoriya's. Seeing the questioning look, he elaborated further. Midoriya's made himself out to be a lot more powerful than he actually is. Sure, he's got that all-powerful gauntlet, but you take that away and he goes back to being a quirkless teenager. The quirkless minority will always be on his side no matter what he does, he is their idol after all. However, if you could get the rest of the population to see that he's not as big as he made himself out to be, then they might stop supporting him. He paused to let his words sink in. You of all people know how important an image needs to be maintained to hold together a society. But how would I restore the people's faith in heroes and myself? The hero asked. You're probably not going to like this, but you're going to have to challenge Izuku Midoriya to a public battle. The Prime Minister of Japan stared down at his now empty glass. You need to face him as All Might, the symbol of peace, in a final stand to stop his era of darkness from taking hold once and for all. The words sounded out of comic book, but were so lackluster as if the man didn't even believe what he was saying would work. You'll have to give it your all this time. He's just a kid. A poor, sad and angry kid who doesn't fully understand or realize what he's doing. Going all out on Midoriya was still something he was a bit reluctant to do. You still don't seem to understand what Izuku Midoriya is. Toriyama pinched the bridge of his nose in frustration. He's unlike your average villain. In fact, he's something entirely new that we've never seen before. The man went on. His intelligence is fueled by his raw, untempered determination and ambition. He thinks of ideas no one else has ever thought, because in today's society there's no need to think of such things anymore. He thinks so many moves ahead, plans within more plans. He's not afraid to flaunt his power to the world. He's also studied how our society functions in every facet. That's how he was able to pull all this off in the first place. Okay, I get it, he's a genius. Toshinori summed up. But even geniuses can't predict everything. You're right. That's why the best chance at beating him is to completely blindside him with a bold move he'll never expect. Reaching into his drawer again, the Prime Minister pulled out a thin file. This hasn't been publicly announced yet, but in 3 weeks Midoriya will be giving a speech along with a special presentation that has to do with the next step of his hero reformation plan. He handed it to the hero. What is he presenting? The skinny blonde man took the file and flipped through it. You're going to love this, the Prime Minister said with heavy sarcasm. Apparently it's some new Titan robot that he's calling a possible candidate for a new symbol of peace. Other than that, I don't know anything about what he's cooking up in that island base of his. He's holding it at the Coruscant Stadium. That's a big place. How many people will be attending? Toshinori was surprised at where Midoriya was holding this event. It was usually reserved for sporting events bigger than the Udata Sports Festival and for hosting the Hero Awards, where professionals were given accolades for great accomplishments and deeds. Well, the event is going to be free to attend, and with how popular Midoriya is lately, they'll probably fill every seat. He chuckled at how smart Midoriya was at publicity moves like this. Also, it will be televised live. You'll have to infiltrate the event as a spectator, then unveil yourself when you challenge him in front of everyone. What happens when I defeat him? He didn't say if he said when, assuring himself that he could still beat the teen if he went all out. Remove the gauntlet from his arm and bring him outside the stadium. I'll have authorities on standby ready to take him to a detainment facility to await trial. Toriyama supplied. I'll then have heroes and police sent to shut down his base of operations. You make it sound so easy. Toshinori added. It's a lot more difficult than I'm making it out to be. The minister frowned as he thought of the potential headache this whole operation would be. Plus there's also the public backlash that will need to be dealt with, which is why I'm relying on you to affirm the people that the symbol of peace is still strong and ready to uphold justice. Can you do that? Of course. He would also begin preparing Mirio to be his successor. If he couldn't get one for all back from Midoriya's gauntlet, then he could at least train the older boy to take his place as the new symbol of peace. Mirio was already strong and incredibly heroic. When he graduated and started making a name for himself, then Toshinori planned to retire and leave the future in his capable hands. Then good luck to you. The Prime Minister breathed a sigh of relief as he turned off the signal jammer and called for his security to escort All Might safely out of the building. Forgive me, All Might, Toriyama thought as he gazed at his empty glass with regret. Elsewhere. All right, just remain still. Izuku smiled as Uraraka did as he told. They were currently in the testing room that Izuku had built for using the new gadgets and support gear that Mei and he created. The metal floor panel opened up behind her as a robotic arm extended from it with a device held in its claw. It pressed the device, which resembled a metal backpack, against Ochako's back, where a series of straps snaked their way around her torso. Is it tight enough? Izuku approached and made sure the straps were fitted properly. She blushed at the feeling of his hands on her body. The brown-haired girl tried her best to think of something else to distract her from this actions. Don't worry, I'll catch you if something goes wrong. Izuku assured her as he took a step back, completely oblivious to her flushed face. Now go ahead and use your quirk on yourself. Uraraka nodded, pushing aside her momentary embarrassment to float herself off the ground. As she got a few yards up into the air, the device strapped to her back transformed and unfurled into a set of metallic wings. Each was roughly the size of her own body and made of numerous diamond-shaped feathers constructed from a light but durable metal alloy. This support gear that Izuku developed kept her balanced in the air and would even grant her mobility. In other words, these mechanical wings would give her the ability to fly. So far so good. Ochako gave him 2 thumbs up, which almost caused her to lose her balance. Careful. This will take some getting used to, Izuku cautioned. Tilt your body left and right to rotate yourself. She followed his instructions, slowly making 180s in the air. Lean forward a bit to fly forward and lean back to do the opposite. Ochako smiled as she carefully moved around the testing room. They spent the next few hours practicing maneuvering through the air, taking breaks here and there so she didn't make herself sick with her quirk. Luckily, all the combat and quirk training had increased her stamina greatly. Now there are thrusters that will give you some speed. Izuku began to explain as they started the next round of practice. Do you want to try them out or perhaps wait another day until you're more comfortable with these wings? No time like the present. She gave him the go-ahead. Okay. Get ready, it has a kick. He pulled a remote and pressed a button on it. Almost immediately neon gets burst from between the metallic feathers propelling her across the testing room. Whoa! He quickly grabbed a hold of her with the reality stone's power and stopped Ochako from nearly crashing face first into the wall. On second thought. She chuckled nervously. Why don't we hold off on that for a while? Yeah, that seems appropriate. Izuku agreed and gently placed her on the ground, switching the wings off as the girl deactivated her quirk. Removing the wings, he stepped back, letting her stretch her sore muscles. Don't worry, the field version will be lighter in weight, compact and much more comfortable to wear. He promised while handing her a bottle of water that he produced from a small portal. There's something I've been meaning to ask you. The brown-haired teen gratefully took the water. Yes, he replied as he put some notes into the small tablet device he carried on his person. I don't want to sound impatient, but we've been training almost daily. When do you think we'll be ready to go out into the world? She was referring to herself, Todoroki and Ida. When could they be heroes? That's what she wanted to know. Soon. He vowed. Things are progressing ahead of schedule, much faster than I planned. Izuku looked up at the ceiling. Everything is almost in place. There's just one last piece on the board I need to take out of the game before the new world can start to take root. All Might. Ochako frowned sadly. She didn't hate the man, but she didn't like the man either for what he said to Izuku a year ago. Unfortunately, he was the last person standing in the way of real progress and change, as her friend explained. Izuku promised that he didn't want All Might dead, just out of his way. We all have to grow up sometime. Part of growing up is letting go of our childhood heroes. He said with a hint of coldness. It's time for our society to grow up. As he finished, an explosion could be heard coming from the lab next door, ruining the tension of what he just said. Mai. Izuku sighed as he turned towards the direction of the sound. She blew something up again? Ochako chuckled at the resident mad engineer's antics, and he replied with a deadpan stare that said, obviously. The repair drones don't have a consciousness, emotions, or mind of their own, but I think even they are starting to get sick of repairing the lab every day. He ran a hand through his messy green hair. Excuse me. He quickly left the testing room. Luckily the lab was right down the hall from where they were. Uraraka watched him go with a cheerful smile. Not everything could go smoothly, it seemed. Inside the lab. Maybe he didn't hear that. May frantically tried to sweep up fallen debris and clean up the mess before you know who arrived. Hear what? You blowing the lab up again? Izuku said from behind, making her jump like a startled cat. Actually no. She quickly spun around to correct his assumption. Looking around the facility, he noticed that there wasn't the usual smoke and fire, but there was debris everywhere for some odd reason. Highly suspicious in his eyes. What did you do? Izuku crossed his arms like a disappointed dad. You know our new baby we've been making? May smiled as she rubbed the back of her head. I may have, turn ethamontosi wathi kudo. She said that last part quickly, but he heard her loud and clear. You activated Nemesis. He chastised her. I told you not to switch it on or start testing it without my supervision. I know, but I just wanted to see it in action just for a moment. She pleaded. He didn't blow anything up. I just had him punch the wall. Which wall? He wondered aloud. That one. May grinned and pointed at the wall behind him. Izuku turned around to stare at the colossal gaping hole in the concrete. He turned back around to look at her, then back to the wall again. Okay, that is impressive. He pointed to the hole. I didn't think it could do that. I made a few modifications to the armor plating and juiced up the hydraulics and engine that gives him super strength. She explained proudly. I want to see it. Forgetting his earlier frustration with her, Izuku eagerly wanted to see what she'd done to his super titan. She too was eager to show it off and grabbed his wrist, dragging over to something large and covered in a black sheet. All about the reveal. May exclaimed as she whipped the sheet right off. Oh! Izuku was surprised to see there were more than just a few modifications to the armor plating. Yeah, I took the impact absorbing panels that you use to practice your Power Stone abilities and applied it to his armor. She explained, pointing to the robot's body. I just thought you were going to apply it to vital areas. I didn't think you would apply it to the whole body. He started muttering about all the ways this could be used to improve Nemesis's combat abilities. Well, we want him to last, don't we? May seemed proud of her latest accomplishment. The ultimate baby, she liked to call it. Not forever though. Just until a new human symbol of peace can arise. Izuku sighed. As much as he valued these robots, they still couldn't replace his dream of an ideal human hero. A cold soulless machine could never be that. Though he couldn't wait now to see the look on the people's faces during the big presentation in a few weeks. Todoroki sat in the back of the limousine quietly. Next to him sat Midoriya, who was trying to preoccupy himself by looking out the window at the people and buildings they passed. Such an awkward situation they found themselves in. Which is not what one of them intended. Still not very talkative, are you? Midoriya finally broke the silence. Is that a bad thing? Todoroki asked as he side-eyed him. Not at all. Midoriya smiled pleasantly. It means you're more a person of action rather than words. I like that. You know you didn't have to give me a ride. Shoto pointed out. Yeah, but where I'm going happens to be close by to the hospital your mom is staying at. Izuku explained. How are things, by the way? With your family, that is? He was given only silence instead of an answer. I understand if you don't want to talk about it. No, it's all right to be curious. The dual quirk wielder took a breath before continuing. After I was legally emancipated from my father's custody, Natsuo moved out. My sister Fuyumi is the only one who stayed behind, and she won't leave no matter what we tell her. After all this time, she's still trying to hold together a family that's long since shattered. Izuku truly thought it sad and tragic. He honestly applauded Fuyumi for her efforts, but there are some things that just couldn't be repaired. I don't know what to tell you. I've never really had a father in my life. My mother took care of me, so I'm not the best person to go to for family advice. What happened to your father? Now it was Shoto's turn to be curious. I don't really remember much of him. He had to work overseas and left when I was about 5 years old. There was something odd about the rushed and apathetic way he spoke. Todoroki decided to leave it alone though. Like Izuku said, it wasn't his place to pry, but talking about it did help. I believe this is your stop. The limousine came to a halt at the main entrance to the hospital. There one of Titans opened the door for Shoto. The boy eyed the machine that was part of the team that patrolled around the facility. One of the benefits to being part of Izuku Midoriya's Knights of Balance was a troop of Titan robots to protect each of their families and loved ones. Call when you're ready to leave. Was all Izuku said as the door was closed behind Todoroki. Shoto silently waved at the vehicle and went inside the hospital to see his mother. After checking in at the front desk, he went up the elevator to her room. He slowly knocked on the door and took a step in to see his mother's smiling face. Mum. She returned his greeting as she sat by the window in a chair. Hello Shoto, it's been a while. She commented on the boy's absence. Rei understood completely though. With all the training in school, it was probably hard to find time. I'm sorry. Shoto apologized regretfully as he moved closer. He let her gently pull him into a hug. It was awkward the first time it happened when he visited, but he was slowly getting used to this and returned the embrace. It's all right, you have a lot going on. This was his first day off in a while. So how have you been? Last time you said something about making an important decision. Shoto decided to tell her everything. He told her how he dropped out of U.A, joined up with Midoriya, his reason for joining him, and the Hero Regulation Department. Shoto also told her about his other former classmates who joined him. She was surprised to hear some of things he said, but she'd seen the news and knew who Midoriya was already and what he'd done. She didn't exactly approve, but if Shoto trusted him then it was all right. Mom, I need to know, do you think I made the right choice? The dual quirk user wanted to know, and who better to tell him than his own mother. Do you think you made the right choice? Rei asked him the same question. Yes. Shoto replied without hesitation. Then there you go. She smiled at him. You chose to join Midoriya because you believe in his cause. You're right. I want to serve as an example of what a hero should be. The boy explained again. There are more heroes out there like Endeavor. I want to help Midoriya change things for the better so people like him will no longer exist. His expression turned angry at the thought of that man. Shoto. You shouldn't hate your father. Rei looked sad as she said. After everything he did to you, to us, and to Tuya. You still don't hate him. Shoto couldn't believe what he heard from. I don't hate your father, I pity him. She had long since gotten over her fear and rage towards that man after a few years of therapy. Because of who he is and what he's done, he'll never know love, or friendship, or human kindness, and I honestly feel sorry for him. Hey Sigurd. And now he's lost his quirk, his hero career and his reputation, all the things that mattered most to him. In way he's paid for what he owed. I still won't forgive him. Shoto declared. That's fine as long as you move on with your life and don't let the past ruin your future. Rei smiled again at her youngest child. When did you become so wise? He wondered. When I became a mom. She answered playfully. Rei decided to change the subject by asking him more about Midoriya and the organization her son was now a part of. Shoto mentioned something about one of the members of the group. He couldn't say much as it was classified, but her son let slip a certain detail about the man's quirk. It caused a memory to pop up in the woman's mind of happier times. Mom, look. If I make my flame super hot it turns blue. A red-headed 11-year-old boy beamed up at her as he held a small blue wisp of a flame in his hand. She shook the memory away as to avoid where that trail of memories would lead. Best not to have a breakdown in front of Shoto. Rei didn't want her son to ever have to see her like that again. Meanwhile, Child Health and Care Center. Here, why don't you pass these out to everyone? Dr. Higurashi handed Bakugo a crate of colored pencils for today's art activity. The boy quietly grumbled, but tried to keep a calm facade as he handed out packs of pencils to each of the kids. The group of quirkless children shyly accepted the drawing utensils from the intimidating blonde teenager. After he was finished, Bakugo quickly made his way back to the front of the art room to stand next to the doctor. He'd been coming 3 days out of the week here for 3 weeks now. Not much had really changed, Aizawa had noted. Katsuki assisted the good doctor, but still remained standoffish towards the kids. The homeroom teacher had hoped that helping quirkless children would give the boy some perspective on the suffering and hardships of others and maybe even humble him a bit. That didn't look like it was happening anytime soon though. If Katsuki Bakugo didn't start making improvements to his personality and behavior, then Aizawa and Nizu would have to resort to drastic measures. Could you keep an eye on them for a few minutes? Dr. Higurashi asked the blonde boy who looked like he would rather not. Thanks. She stepped out of the room to have a chat with Aizawa behind the one-way mirror. Still keeping them at arm's length, is he? Shoyuta looked at her apologetically. In his mind he was just as much to blame for the boy's behavior as everyone who originally shaped him into what he was today. The kids are still intimidated by him. She sighed sadly. His perpetual scowl certainly isn't helping things either. One of the health center workers came into the observation room and whispered something in the doctor's ear. Excuse me, I need to step out for a moment. That's odd. Aizawa watched her rush out, but thought nothing more of it as he continued to carefully observe Bakugo. The lobby. It's always a pleasure when you visit. Higurashi greeted the guest that walked into the front entrance. Please, the pleasure is all mine. Izuku Midoriya walked up to the doctor. People like you who treat people like me with basic human decency are a rarity and deserve my infinite respect. Shall we convene in my office? She gestured for him to follow. After you. Izuku followed after her, ignoring the stares from the employees and medical workers. He had visited the health center several times before, but they still weren't used to seeing such a powerful and influential individual walk into the facility. So how are things going with all the extra funding you're getting? The gauntlet wielder asked when they arrived in her office. With all the money you donated, we were able to take in more quirkless children, safely removing them from that vile foster care system that treated them like garbage. The doctor explained. Have any heroes showed up to donate their time? Izuku had publicly submitted that heroes should be helping out society in small ways instead of only fighting crime. He disliked heroes who only cared about improving their rank by showing up to save the day when villains appeared or when a disaster occurred and then left when the job was done, or worse, stuck around to pose and gloat for the press. Some of the more genuine pros had decided to be honest and asked the Hero Regulation Department what they should do. Midoriya told them about this child care center that took in quirkless children as a test to see what they would do with the information. I have a list of the ones that have. Dr. Higurashi handed him a clipboard containing a list of professional heroes that visited the facility and donated their time to improving these kids' lives. Not as many as I'd hoped. Izuku remarked as he read the list. Best Genist has been here? He was surprised to see a top-ranking hero on the list. Oh yes, he's been coming here for quite some time actually. Before your department was formed. She explained. Best Genist has been visiting while he recovers from a severe injury he got during the Kamino incident. He's usually here on arts and crafts days and teaches the kids things like how to macrame. What a good man. Izuku applauded the hero for his kindness. He was true hero, even when the odds were against him he still tried to stop All for One. Yet the media cared more about All Might's victory over the villain than anything else. Also, there's been another development here that you need to know about. The woman chewed on her lip nervously. And what's that? Back in the art room, Bakugo quietly paced the room, keeping a safe distance away from the kids. Personally, he didn't have anything against them, as it was Deku he hated and not quirkless people in general. His counseling sessions got him to admit that much at least. The reason he was avoiding too much contact with these less fortunate children was mainly that he didn't trust himself around them. What if he accidentally set off his quirk and hurt or frightened them? Or worse, what if his stupid big mouth said something terrible? Where was that attitude years ago? That voice in his head that sounded like Deku asked. As he looked around the room, he watched the kids as they silently drew pictures with crayons and colored pencils. One of them in particular called his attention. A small blonde child drawing a crude image of a messy green-haired character dressed in gray with a yellow arm. It was obvious who the kid was drawing, but Bakugo asked anyway. "Who is that?" The boy looked up from his paper. "The doctor said we should draw our heroes. I drew Izuku Midoriya." The child smiled while Katsuki paled. "He's your hero?" The older boy swallowed nervously. "Yeah. He's quirkless like us, but he didn't let that beat him." The child spoke with excitement. "He even fought All Might to a standstill. But he's a villain," Bakugo said while clenching his fists, trying not to lose his temper. "He's not a villain," the blonde boy exclaimed adamantly. "He's proving quirkless people like us aren't so useless." Bakugo wanted to yell. He wanted to argue against the child's claim and say that Midoriya was a despicable bastard that deserved to rot in prison for what he's done. Unfortunately, he couldn't. Aizawa made it very clear that one slip-up and his time at U.A's hero course would be over. Sadly, Katsuki could do nothing but stew in his anger. "Your attention, everyone!" Dr. Higurashi joyfully exclaimed as she walked back into the room. "Your favorite visitor has arrived." The children's mood turned bright and cheerful as the door opened, revealing Izuku Midoriya. "Hello!" He waved, completely ignoring a stunned and frozen Bakugo. The kids got up from their seats and rushed over to him. They all began talking animatedly with excitement, a huge change from their normal somber mood. Izuku smiled seeing the quirkless children again. He couldn't visit them as much as he would like to, but he always enjoyed bringing a bit of happiness to their worlds. After all, it wasn't that long ago that he was in their shoes. "What's the meaning of this?" Aizawa barged into the room. He had been watching through the mirror and panicked when he saw who appeared. Thinking the worst, he rushed inside ready to defend his blonde student and the children. "It's fine, Aizawa." Dr. Higurashi placed a hand on his shoulder. "Director Midoriya comes by every now and then to visit the children," she answered, trying to calm him. "He's one of our financial supporters. Why didn't you inform me of this?" Erasure Head glared at her while his capture weapon stopped moving around him. "I didn't think it was important," she said honestly. Thinking about it rationally, Aizawa realized that he couldn't fault her for that. She didn't know that Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo had a very unpleasant history with each other. Bakugo was watching Deku interact with the kids as if it was perfectly natural. Now it all made sense why these quirkless children looked up to someone like him. The blonde began to slowly back away, sweat creeping down the back of his neck. Izuku finally turned his gaze to his former bully, emerald eyes piercing straight through him like angry spears. This was just like his recent nightmares, except it was happening in real life. In Katsuki's mind, he was seeing every terrible thing he ever said and done to Izuku. Everything was reflected in those darkened eyes of his that promised infinite pain and misery. Izuku broke eye contact and turned back to the kids, switching back to his cheerful self in an instant. Bakugo couldn't take it and ran out of the room without a word. Aizawa bit back a curse and went after him. Izuku smirked lightly as he watched them leave. Katsuki stormed into one of the restrooms in the care center, going right to the sink. Splashing some water in his face, he took several deep breaths. Forcing himself to calm down, the explosive blonde looked into the mirror. "Just relax, this means nothing." His thoughts stopped racing. So what if Deku is here? Bakugo tried his best to remember the exercises that Hound Dog taught him for situations like this. "I'm not afraid of him. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not." Once he was ready, he went to the door to go back out there, but paused when he heard two familiar voices in the hall just outside the restroom. "So this is what that rodent you call a principal cooked up?" Izuku said mockingly. "Let me guess, this is supposed to teach him humility and respect for others who were not born as fortunate as him. Is that right? What business is it of yours how we teach our students?" Aizawa fired back. Come now, you can't honestly believe that this will change who he is. The gauntlet user gave a questioning glance to the U.A teacher. This is obviously just a bunch of nonsense so you can keep Bakugo for his power. If you had any sense you would have expelled him by now. I know you think that we only care about students based off their quirks and mastery of them, but that's a false accusation. Eraserhead glared at him, completely ditching his normally tired demeanor. He couldn't afford to drop his guard around this boy for even an instant. Nizu said that too. Izuku chuckled at the hypocrisy. You gave a quirk assessment test on the first day of classes where you threatened to expel the student with the least potential. You were just looking at their quirks, weren't you? The teen accused. He got this info from Ochako's very own mouth. That was a rouse to get them to try their best. Aizawa argued back. Oh please. Izuku scoffed. You expelled an entire class once because their quirks weren't good enough to be heroes. Don't deny it. Quirks have nothing to do with it. The teacher still tried to deny Midoriya's beliefs in how the system was ran. Just because other hero schools only cared about quirks didn't mean U.A was the same. Yet here you are doing everything you can to give Katsuki Bakugo a second chance when you and I both know he doesn't deserve it. Izuku smirked back at him. If he didn't have such a powerful quirk and a talent for using it, you would have dropped him without hesitation, just like you discarded Uraraka. What about you? Are you saying you weren't interested in Todoroki, Uraraka and Ida for their quirks? Aizawa questioned him. I chose them because they like me, wanted to see a change in our hero society. Izuku frowned before listing off his reasons. Todoroki was subjected to an abusive father who got away with it simply because he was the country's number 2 hero. Uraraka was kicked out of your school for simply trying to do the right thing and help a friend. Ida's brother was forgotten and tossed aside like garbage by the government that runs the hero system. He walked down the hall getting closer to the underground hero. And All Might, the man who you all look up to as the symbol of peace, would see a return to that world and undo all the hard work I've done to create a better society. So All Might's still a threat to him. Even with his power diminishing. That's what Shota Aizawa was able to get from what was just said. You may think you have everything figured out, but you don't. Izuku just chuckled in response. If only Aizawa knew what he had planned. Well, it was nice seeing you here, but as you know I'm a busy person. He smiled and waved. Best of luck with Bakugo, not like it will do any good though. Midoriya said that last part under his breath as he walked away. Once he was past the corner and out of sight, the tension in Aizawa's shoulders finally released. Letting out a sigh of relief, he turned to face the door of the restroom. You can come out now, he's gone. The door opened and out stepped Katsuki with a poor attempt to keep his gruff facade, but the eraser hero could tell that he was scared. I think we're done for today. I'll go tell the doctor that we'll be leaving a little early. He didn't make a comment about how Bakugo nearly had a panic attack in the bathroom. The boy would have to open about his fears and insecurities and come to them when he was ready. Oh, and one more thing. They both froze when Midoriya reappeared from around the corner. If he hurts those kids physically, mentally, or emotionally, I will rip his quirk out of him without hesitation, regardless of what the law says I can and cannot do. Izuku threatened while glaring hatefully at his former school bully. He then disappeared once again. Damn it. Aizawa mentally cursed as he watched Midoriya strike fear into Bakugo again. He could try to justify his actions all he wanted, but Eraserhead could tell that he was enjoying what he was doing. Just like any villain if they were given all the power they could ever want. Later Island H.Q. You're certainly in a better mood. Shoto remarked as he watched his leader stroll down the corridor. I'm happy, well happy for you actually. Izuku lead him through the base to the testing room. Ochako was done practicing her wings for the day and now it was Todoroki's turn. May finished upgrading the prototype I gave her to work with for your new support gear. You should really let that girl sleep. The half-and-half boy commented. As a matter of fact, she's under my strict orders to sleep at least 8 hours every night and required to take regular meal breaks. Izuku laughed. I can tell you how many times I've had to send the robots into her lab to drag her to bed or to lunch. She just doesn't like to stop working. As they entered the testing room, Todoroki noticed the 2 long metallic rectangular cases in the center. I take it this is the support gear you promised me weeks ago. He stated as he approached the cases. Actually, this has been an idea that's been floating around in my head ever since I saw your performance during the sports festival. Izuku gestured for him to open the containers. Shoto leaned over, unlocked the latches and flipped the first case open. Sitting there encased in a mold of protective foam was a long metal claymore sword. This weapon looked more modernized with circuit board-like patterns and what seemed like small vents along the blade and a light blue tint covering the metal. There was also a silver symbol of a snowflake embedded in the handle. He opened the other case and there was an identical sword, but this one had the symbol of a flame embedded in its handle and its metal was tinted red. 2 swords? Shoto asked with a raised eyebrow. Yup. Izuku was excited. Go ahead, pick one up and channel your quirk through it. Todoroki looked skeptical at first, but did as he was told. With his right hand he picked up the blue sword and channeled the ice part of his quirk into the handles. The claymore activated instantly, emitting a light blue glow as an icy mist began covering the blade emanating from the vents. Elemental blades. The green-haired teen said proudly. One of my finest technological works. Though I originally wanted to make it one single sword for you to channel both sides of but the constant change in extreme temperatures caused the device to rapidly deteriorate, the science just isn't there yet. Said the guy with an all-powerful gauntlet. Shoto muttered quietly to himself. These swords will grant even more strength behind your quirk while increasing your range as well. They'll also help regulate your body temp to limit the negative effects of your quirk. Seeing the confusion on his face, he told him to swing the weapon while using his quirk. The youngest Todoroki attempted just that. Lifting the surprisingly light sword, he swung it in a horizontal arc towards the wall. In nearly an instant, an arc of ice blasted out of the blade, colliding with wall and freezing it over in the same path as his swing. His heterochromatic eyes widened in shock at what he did so effortlessly with his quirk and this device combined. See? Amazing. Shoto complimented as he looked at the sword. I see why the media calls you a technological genius. The funny thing is that I'm not really inventing anything new. This stuff has always been around, I just put the pieces together and took it all to a new level. Using technology to enhance quirks wasn't a new discovery, but people and governments were always too afraid to take it too far. They just didn't want the technology to fall into the hands of villains, which it almost always did anyway. So the red one must be for my fire. The dual quirk user realized. Yes, but I would hold off on swinging that one around until you have better control over that side of your quirk. Izuku warned him. There's just one problem. Shoto turned around to face his leader. I don't know how to use a sword, let alone wield 2 at once. That's where he comes in. The green-haired teen pointed his thumb towards the door where Stain entered just as he said that, looking as menacing as ever. Stain here is going to give you a crash course on blade wielding. After that you'll have to practice on your own time, as I'll be sending him on a secret mission soon. I still don't understand what you see in this kid. Stain sneered as he walked over to him. How do you know he won't turn into a little Endeavor Jr. on us? Because unlike his father, he can see what's wrong and improve upon himself, mentally and physically. Izuku explained with a glare that told him to please get along with Todoroki. I don't want to work with this psychopath. Shoto said honestly to the hero killer's face. And I don't want to work Himiko Toga, but she does get good results, so I put up with her. Izuku turned his gaze to the boy. Shoto. During missions and assignments you're going to be the leader. When we eventually recruit more potential heroes, you'll probably have to work with people you don't like, so you should probably start getting used to it. Wait, you want me to be the leader? Shoto was stunned at what Izuku just revealed. He always thought the gauntlet user was always going to be in charge. I can't be there every step of the way. I'm not a hero. Izuku shrugged. So someone else will have to take charge as the mighty blade of the Knights of Balance. I think that someone should be you. I'm not sure if Izuku raised hand to cut him off. It's fine, you don't have to give me an answer right now. Izuku started walking his way out of the testing room to leave Shoto and Stain to their work. After all, he paused and turned around to look at him to say one last thing before he left. It's your choice. So you plan to finally arrest Midoriya once and for all? Gran Torino summed up what his old student just explained. Yeah. Toshinori answered solemnly. Do you have the stomach for it though? All Might wasn't sure if that was a joke or not. You failed to stop him twice already because of your own feelings of guilt. What will make this time any different? This time it's me who will be catching him by surprise. The man stated with conviction. Are you sure? Because from what I've seen you've been down this road before. He was referring to all the times they thought they were one step ahead of Midoriya only to find out he was the one ahead of them. How do you know this isn't another trap? I'm not so foolish as to fall for that again. Even if it is a trap, we've developed a backup plan. Toshinori told him. We have reason to believe the hero killer known as Stain is secretly working for Midoriya. The masked operative in the HRD seems to possess the same quirk as that man. If we can find some tangible evidence and publicly reveal it, you can use Midoriya's own tactics against him. The old hero realized. This time public scrutiny will be aimed at him. I see, you're mounting an attack on two fronts at the same time. Gran Torino rubbed his wrinkled chin in thought. As smart as Midoriya is, he can't be in multiple places at once. That's right. When I publicly confront him next week, Nizu is going to take a crack at accessing Midoriya's files. Toshinori explained the plan. He'll be too busy with me to realize that his computer system has been broken into. How will he do that? Not that Gran Torino was questioning the mouse's intelligence and way around cyberspace, but breaking into the files of a government official will be quite a feat. He has connections with the government. Being Udate's principal for so long has granted him certain privileges. That was all he wanted to say on the matter. Why did you come here then if you've got everything figured? The man's former sensei asked. Because when I beat Midoriya, this be the final act of my hero career. The gaunt man sighed almost tragically. I can feel One for All bleeding away little by little each day. My final fight with Midoriya will probably expend all of it. One for All, it's part of that gauntlet, the green stone. The old hero pondered this. I'm sure some of the country's top scientists could figure out a way to get the quirk back. Whether they can or they can't doesn't matter anymore. I'm entrusting the future to Mirio Togata. All Might proclaimed proudly. As my successor, if One for All can be retrieved, then by rights it will go to him. Well then, good luck to you. Gran Torino watched his old student get up, wobble for a brief moment before righting himself. Then the blond man walked out of his house. Call it old intuition, but something didn't feel right. Almost like there was a nagging sensation of doubt that Toshinori might not win. But why wouldn't he win? All Might was the world's strongest hero. He had years of experience under his belt. What did Izuku Midoriya have? As powerful as he was, it was still relatively recent that he acquired his power. Even if he possessed One for All and All for One, that didn't mean he mastered them. So what was the threat here? Why wouldn't this bad feeling go away? Island HQ conference room. I thought it best to assign all of you code names. Izuku explained as he slid envelopes to all 6 of his knights along the meeting table. For you 3. He turned to his right to the 3 former Udata students. Publicly you can still have whatever hero name you so desire, but during your time in my department when out on an assignment you will be referred to as these. They each opened their envelopes revealing an I.D badge with their respective codenames. Angel. Ochako smiled at that. He must have got the idea from the wings he gave her. Fahrenheit. Shoto read his. Rather to the point, but he preferred that. Quicksilver. Tenya frowned at his codename. He would have rather stuck with his hero name Ingenium, but he'd roll over and stick with it. Now you 3. He turned to the left seats. Are still villains wanted by the police, so you will always be referred to by your codenames whenever anyone else is around. You will also be wearing masks to hide your identity. The 3 criminals opened their envelopes to read their I.D badges. Guillotine. Stain smirked at how fitting that sounded. Chameleon. Himiko pouted her name. She wanted something cute like what Uraraka got. Dragon. Dabi cocked his head at his name. He kind of liked it. Do not lose your badges please, you'll need them to gain access to the base. Izuku warned them all. Now on to the next thing. The following week is the big public presentation I'll be giving at Coruscant Stadium. After that we'll be able to move forward with the next step of the plan. You still haven't told us what you're presenting. Todoroki brought up. Well, since it's almost finished I guess there's no point in keeping it secret anymore. Pushing a few buttons on the table, a touchpad keyboard appeared. Izuku put in his password and series of access codes. In a few moments a hologram was projected in the center of the meeting table. The image appeared to be one of the Titan robots, but this one looked bigger and more powerful. This is called Nemesis. It's a robotic peacekeeping unit designed to temporarily replace All Might. I still say these walking trash cans will never be able to replace real heroes. Stain said with a haughty attitude. They're not supposed to. With false heroes slowly being weeded out, these robots will be needed to pick up the slack. Izuku supplied. Are you mass-producing this one? Tenya asked, making mental notes of everything he was seeing and hearing about this project. No. This time I'm going with a more quality over quantity approach. He explained. May and I will just keep upgrading and improving on this one until it becomes obsolete when a human symbol of peace can arise to take the mantle. I've fought these robots many times, they're strong but not that strong, so what makes this one so special? Todoroki questioned. Unbeknownst to them, Ida was listening intently to learn all he could about Nemesis. This one is designed and built to fight on par with some of the top heroes. Izuku said proudly. Next week I'll be presenting this to the public along with a demonstration. He conveniently left out what that demonstration would be, not that they noticed. After a short summary of their progress in training, Izuku ended the meeting. Once they left the conference room, the only ones that remained were Izuku and Stain, who needed to have a more private meeting. So any leads yet? The gauntlet wielder asked. A few. Stain frowned as he reached into his pack and pulled out a small plastic bag that he tossed on the table before them. Quark erasing bullets. Using the gauntlet, he lifted the bag through the air and into his awaiting hands. Where did you get these? Izuku pulled one of the small metal bullet darts and examined it closely. A small-time gang had a few of them. At first they weren't that willing to part with them, but with a little persuasion, they coughed them up, eventually. The former hero killer said with a dark tone. This could pose a problem in the future. Izuku frowned as he tossed the bullet back into the bag. If these became more available, it could potentially ruin everything he tried to achieve. He would have to take these to the lab for further analysis when he had time. It's not that much of a threat. It only erases a quirk for less than a day. Unlike the boy, Stain didn't seem as concerned by this development. Still, we need to find out where these bullets are coming from. Izuku looked to the man for answers. No one that I encountered seems to know. It must be a very complex distribution network. That was as far as his investigation was able to get for now. Dabi sticks out too much, so I'll be assigning Himiko to assist you in tracking down the source. Seeing him nod in agreement, the green-haired teen decided to ask something that's been on his mind for a while now. So what do you think about the next phase? Well, as much as I still respect him, even I'm not blind to how much weaker he's become. Stain had to admit that at least. Midoriya had done a good job of convincing him of this fact. If we hope to make any real progress, then he'll need to go away. Then it looks like we're in agreement. Izuku smiled at him. Elsewhere. Fucking vultures, Bakugo glared at the crowd of press that he passed on his way back into UA. They media hounds tried to swarm him and Aizawa, but that teacher had it up to here with them and made them back off with an intense glare. After that he was told to go back to the dormitories. The ash blonde did as he was told without a fuss. Another week babysitting those quirkless kids had gone by and Bakugo still kept them at a distance, but out of fear of himself mostly. Though he didn't tell Aizawa about that, so the man just assumed he wasn't making any real progress. Walking through the common room, he received silent stares as his welcome. Bakugo's classmates still wouldn't talk to him after learning the truth from Deku. He thought at first that wouldn't bother him, but it did. The hallucination was right, it did hurt being alone. Bakugo knew that some of them probably blamed him for what Deku was doing right now. They also probably blamed him for losing 3 of their classmates to the villain as well. Whatever. Deciding to just ignore the stares, Katsuki went up to his room. When he arrived at his door, he was surprised to see someone standing next to the door waiting for him. Hey! Kirishima said awkwardly, not meeting his eyes yet. What do you want? Katsuki grumbled as he went to open his door. I think you and I need to talk. The redhead finally looked up from the ground to face him. What Midoriya said has been bothering for a while, and I need to know your side of the story. As much as he wanted to refuse, to turn the other boy away, he knew he couldn't. Bakugo had already confessed this all to Hound Dog during counseling session, so doing it again shouldn't be all that hard. All right. The blonde led him inside, nodding at the desk chair for him to have a seat. Bakugo sat across from him on the bed. After a long tense silence, he decided to tell the whole story. He started with how he knew Deku since kindergarten. He explained to Kirishima how his quirk first manifested and Deku's didn't. How he came back one day from the doctor to find out he was quirkless. He explained how everyone started treating Deku, himself included. Bakugo finished the story by summarizing recent events that they both knew already, leaving Kirishima to process everything he was told. He thought that he would feel better by getting all this off his chest again, but he didn't. So you're a bully, that's the gist of it. The redhead gave him a disapproving stare. Katsuki wanted to deny it at first, but he crushed the instinct. A bully is exactly what he was, he could admit that now. You thought Midoriya was looking down on you when in reality it was the opposite. He was looking up to you. He could see that because he too used to look up to Bakugo. The blonde's eyes widened when he was told that. That made sense, The nerd always used to follow him around when they were younger. Heroes are supposed to protect the weak and helpless, not belittle and mock them. What you did wasn't manly at all. Kirishima stood up from his chair. He was so disappointed that he had to go back to his room and think about all this. Bakugo watched him leave. He didn't bother stopping him, he was done trying to justify his past actions. Kirishima paused before he walked out the door, looking back at him one last time. It looked like he wanted to say more but decided not to. With that he left, closing the door on his way out. So that's it then. Bakugo's eyes went down to the floor. He spilled his guts to the closest person to a friend that he had, and now he too turned away from him. The blonde sighed as he wondered when he would ever live down what he said and did to Deku. He realized his hatred for him in the past was horribly misplaced, but he definitely hated Deku now for the right reasons. That damn nerd was dismantling and warping the hero system to better suit his twisted ideals. The bastard even humiliated All Might, the person they both once looked up to. Despite the past between them, Deku needed to be stopped. Figuring out how was the real problem. Maybe if he found a way to beat him, everyone would forget and forgive what he'd done. It wasn't much, but it was the only hope he had left at this point. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe and support the original writer. It really helps. See you in the next part.